It's the fourth day of the week, and of course, we're here on the AM show. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. To all of you watching us this morning, welcome aboard. Now, the news will be served to you presently, and right after that, we'll be joined by Volta Regional President of the Ghana Institute of Surveyors. He'll be joining us. Maxwell Lukuto is our guest. And then he also is an NDC parliamentary aspirant for South Tong. We'll be bringing you that right after the news. But then we get into the big stories, and Ghana has been cited as a main transit point for the illicit shipments of gold. Now, an investigative piece by Al Jazeera recently stoked a debate about how some Ghanaian officials could be complicit in activities of money laundering for a group of mafia controlling the gold industry in Africa. Well, a safety standard company known as Original says officially gold worth at least $22.8 and $23.45 billion leave Africa and Latin America every year. That's how much we're losing. And if we had those sums of money, many of the countries in Africa wouldn't be going to the IMF in the first place. But from there, we'll also be telling you about a research put together by the University of Ghana's Department of Communication Studies and Media, the Media Foundation for West Africa, which has shown that recruitment into the Ghanaian media is generally untransparent. Many people working in the media do not have contracts. There are no established structures for promotion in most media organizations. Promotion is largely based on whom you know and owners or managers' whims and caprices. Salaries in the media are woefully low. It also reveals that most media organizations do not provide counseling support for employees who experience trauma in the line of work. We discuss this report with Dr. Gilbert Tieta. He's a senior lecturer at the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana. Dr. Theodora Dame Agentete, a lecturer at the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana as well. Well, today, we're giving you that opportunity. We're thrusting the microphone in your face, and we're giving you the opportunity on Citizens Microphone to share with us your thoughts. Today, we focus on malfunctioning traffic lights. I'm sure you've spotted a few in your community. Well, Bonalisa Frimpong will join us with a report later on the show. We're offering you that opportunity. Share your thoughts, and at the tail end, we'll also give you the opportunity of calling into the show to let us know what is on your mind. It's another beautiful morning. God has been gracious to us. Let's enjoy it and make the most of the situation. Up next, the news. Welcome on the news. Thank you for staying with us. And the Northern Electricity Distribution Company has disconnected power supply to the Dr. Hilla Liman Technical University in Wa. The institution owes NEDCO about 2.2 million Ghana cedis. Correspondent Rafiq Salam reports that the Wa High Court and the Wa Nursing Training College were also disconnected for defaulting on a combined amount of a little over 41,000 Ghana cedis.
Volta River Authority, Northern Electricity Distribution Company, VRA NEDCO, Upper West Regions Area Manager, Engineer Francis Yemiso, first painted the debt situation of his outfit to power generators and transmitters and why the need to embark on the revenue mobilization drive.
VRA NEDCO in general, customers owe us about 1.2 billion Ghana cedis. We owe the power generators, that is mainstream VRA, 1.6 billion Ghana cedis. And then the transmitters, which is Greco, we owe them 481 million Ghana cedis. The department, which is VRA NEDCO, need 120 million Ghana cedis to make power available to our customers. As we speak, we are able to collect only 85 million Ghana cedis from our customers monthly. And currently, we have a deficit of 35 million cedis every month. And if we don't work on this, it means the business will come to a halt.
Consumers of electricity in the Upper West area owed VRA NEDCO staggering amount of 107 million Ghana cedis. 82 million of the amount is owed by the ministries, departments, municipal and district assemblies and agencies, while the rest is owed by domestic consumers. The first institution to be disconnected was Dr. Hilal Mantenkal University. They owed via NEDCO an amount of 2.2 million Ghana cedis. After a grand meeting with authorities of the university, it however failed to yield the desired results, resulting in the disconnection.
So you have indicated already, they have disconnected the university, power supply to the university. We are now continuing with the negotiation. We have sent commitment on their part to pay substantial amount, but we haven't reached that negotiation or agreement yet. When we are done with that, they also promised to pay some amount today. When we take the check and we have agreed on the payment plan, we will reconnect them.
Writing examination, whilst others were holding lectures. It therefore brought to a halt activities at the university. The affected students are calling for help.
We just had a light out and we are struggling because the weather is warm and we need light to power the fans for us so we can have a conducive environment to learn.
Maybe if we enter the class, you will not feel comfortable. Besides, people are writing exams, so inside there it will be very hot. Imagine they put a difficult paper in front of you with a warm environment. You know, you are not going to feel it right. So actually it's affecting us, but okay, we are praying to God that maybe whatever the problem might be, it should be settled, and anybody that can help to sustain their lives, and then it will be stable for us, and we'll be very grateful.
The One Nation Training College and the High Court were next to be disconnected. They collectively owed 41,000 Ghana cedis.
The High Court is under disconnection. There's no light there. We've disconnected them because they owe 15,000. And the 15,000, you can see their current bill is not that big. So it means that they've accumulated over the years. And that is major reason why we are disconnected. Actually, this exercise, we are collecting everything.
The Simon Dieden Dombo University for Business and Integrated Development Studies, SDD-UBIS, that's for Jahan Ahmadiyya College of Education, and the One House Palace had a least lack as their disconnections were postponed.
UBIS owe 8.8 million Ghana cedis, but there's a letter from the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Education, directing us to directing that they are going to pay all their bills effective 2021, and after 2021 all other bills that comes they should pay, and for that they are doing the needful. The bill they owe now is 145,000, which they are preparing to pay. They were even in the process of issuing a check before we left there. They are waiting for the Chancellor to sign his portion, then they can issue that amount, 145,000. One House Palace owes 61,000 cedis, and per the directive, that this assembly is supposed to make payments to that effect. But per our records, for close to 2 years, no payment have been made. So we are engaging, and we believe that something good will come out from our engagement.
For now, VRA NEDCO is saying that the exercise is about revenue mobilization, but if the customers fail to pay up, it is there, they will be disconnected. Reporting for JoyNews, Rafiq Salam. Wow.
Well, staying on that beat, NEDCO also disconnected power supply to the offices of the Allied Health Professional Zonal Council in Tamale, which was caught in an illegal connection. The occupants had bypassed the meter and were tapping the power directly from source. Martina Bugri reports.
Speaking to journalists after the disconnection exercise, the area manager for NEDCO, Elvis Domiakpo, said they will conduct their investigations and bill the Allied Health Sciences accordingly.
Going on our normal monitoring of the revenue mobilization, we announced some 3 days ago, and then we visited the regional health directorates. They share the same compound with Allied Health Sciences. I think they use the same meter, and we decided to monitor the meter. When we came, we realized that the allied health sciences, they have connected direct, and they have illegally bypassed the meter that they are using with the Ghana Health Service, the Regional Health Directorate. So the Regional Health Directorate, they are on the prepaid, they are paying for it. But the Allied Health Science section, they have bypassed the meter direct. So, and we don't know when they did it. They claim they did it some few weeks ago, but we will not be able to confirm that. So we will do our own investigation and then subject them to the process and make sure that the law will take its course. Like any other customer, we have to analyze. We pick the load, we have to analyze, and then we will recover by estimating their consumptions and ensuring that we'll bill them with it. Customer on prepaid, we have the right to visit the meter and ensure that the meter is capturing the load that is supposed to be capturing. You know, we have experiences where a lot of people have bypassed meters in Tamale and all that. So it's a normal routine practice that we do by monitoring the meters and ensuring that they are capturing their consumptions.
At the High Court in Tamale, the manager in charge of bailing a revenue collection, Hilda Jenny Alhassan, said the court had a commitment to pay and had paid 54,000 Ghana cedis.
We are currently at the High Court's premises of Tamale Metro. I think we engaged the staff, the officer in charge, and we realized that they made payment of 54,000 just last month. Okay, I think in February. Okay, so we realized that they have a plan of consistent payments, but it's not very good. But because they are committed to paying, we agree that we'll further engage them to fast track things, but they haven't been defaulting anymore.
How much are they owing?
Currently, I think the balance on the account is about 64,000, and that includes February and March. They haven't gotten 2 bills, so we are giving them 2 weeks to clear that. Otherwise, we'll come back and disconnect.
The team also moved to the Iyoko offices. Madam Hilda said they had an account for Iyoko, but when they arrived, they noticed they were using a prepaid meter. She said they will go back and reconcile the issue and find out where the lapse occurred.
The Iyoko offices. In our list, we had a Iyoko account that we were following up on. But when we got there, we realized they have a prepaid meter and they are buying up to date. I think this month they did a purchase. So we agree with them that we will go and find out what really happened, because in our data system, our database, we have a lot of information. We don't know what happened. One customer can apply twice, it can be created. So we agree that we'll go and find out and really try to locate that particular Iyoko account. So that's what has happened. That is why we are not disconnecting them. They are on prepaid and they are buying things.
But the one that you have come with, the one that you came with, what's the bill on that?
I think it's about over 140,000.
So in this case, there are 2 accounts.
There are 2 accounts, but we'll still find out, because normally, you know, the addressing system makes it difficult for us to easily locate. We are not moving with the meter readers. So the other step we can go ahead with is to get the meter reader for that route to tell us where he's been sending that bill to, and then we can take the necessary action.
Well, on our next story, the United States Agency for International Development says the current macroeconomic situation in the country has made the cost of credit and farm inputs very high for farmers. USAID believes the situation is affecting the production and yields of farmers across the country who have a difficulty in accessing such critical services to boost their production. There's more in this report.
Market Systems and Resilience Activities, sponsored by the USAID, provides about $6 million to service providers who want to help farmers. Part of the funds has been recycled for access to agricultural finance for smallholder farmers. The organization launched the product for financial institutions, banks, input dealers, and transactional advisors to help take advantage of those incentives to provide services for businessmen and women and smallholder farmers. Raymond Dente is the team lead for agribusiness and financial services.
Currently, there are two challenges facing farmers. Credit is so high because of the current macroeconomic situation, and the cost of inputs is rising. Ghana's CD is not too, the situation with the CD against the dollar. CD is falling, rising, so it's making the situation so volatile. So even where farmers have money to buy, the input prices are rising. So the whole program is to see how we can help the farmers access the inputs at very competitive prices. And the top most input is fertilizer, as we all know, but we have others like seeds and chemicals. So over the period since October last year, we've worked with major actors, the input companies, the financial institutions, the commercial growers, the smallholder farmers up north, to see how we can bring in some incentives to take away the pain points, so to speak. So we are saying that instead of the banks or the financial institutions lending cash for farmers to borrow and then buy inputs, we need to look at a more creative way of doing that.
Deputy Chief of Party of the Market Systems and Resilience Activity of the USAID, Cecil Osei, says they are impressed with the outcome of the engagement with the stakeholders.
This is about the third time we've met them. In the Market Systems and Resilience Activity, we have something we call co-creation. So we have been co-creating with the stakeholders, the banks, the farmers, to get this product together. So today, even though it appeared like something that we have done together, there were still interesting discussions, various angles. New people came and they also expressed their opinions about the products and how it can help both their firms and the smallholder farmers. Programmatically, we are going to do the same thing in Tamale, Polga, and Wa, to make sure that everybody is aware of what is in it and everybody is interested. We get more people interested to access. But from here, we'll also be working with those who even cannot apply, to see how we can help them apply based on the ideas they have, so that they can apply to the grant, and we will process and then give out the funding. So those three products are very, very important, particularly the third one, who talks about transactional advisors. They are to make sure that business people get their documents and papers and their requirements for any loan together.
With the launch of the products and services, it is expected that farmers will have the ease of doing business and have access to farm input and credit at very competitive prices.
In the next story now, Vice President of the Pan-African Mosquito Control Association, Ghana, is asking Ghanaians to protect themselves against the Anopheles stephensi mosquito. Dr. Kingsley Bedu notes that Anopheles stephensi has its peak biting time in the evenings. In the first of our series on Anopheles stephensi, JoyNews' medical correspondent, Dr. Netta Pasram, delves into that issue.
In recent times, there's been so much buzz about a new mosquito species in the Ghanaian terrain, the Anopheles stephensi. What are the peak biting times of the Anopheles stephensi? Is it late afternoon or deep in the night?
There's a particular study that describes its peak biting times. Okay, so for example, the Anopheles gambiae we know will normally bite in the night. Okay, between midnight, early mornings, where people are vulnerable, completely asleep. Okay, but the peak biting times we've seen has been reported in publications is the fact that they start biting from 6 to 9 before you go to sleep. This is one of the highest times that it bites, you know, and also has what they call the behavior plasticity. It can change it. For example, we know that in rural areas, in places that they like to bite animals. They can also bite humans if humans are there. They can bite and rest indoors. They can choose to bite and rest outdoors. Okay, so there could be many different things. but this is quite unique. The fact that it peak biting times from 6 to about 9 p.m. before you go to sleep.
In the spirit of protecting oneself against this mosquito, Anopheles stephensi, it is important to sleep under insecticide-treated mosquito nets and also to make use of indoor residual spraying. Additionally, you could wear long clothing or make use of insect repellents. For Joy News, Dr. Netta Pasram.
Now, the Fisheries and Aquaculture Developmental Ministry has begun a piloting of the electronic monitoring system in industrial vessels operating in Ghana's exclusive economic zone to fight illegal fishing. We'll bring you more details of that story in this report.
The industrial sector contributes significantly to the fish production in Ghana. It consists of the tuna and the trawl sector. Despite the contributions, the sector has challenges in illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing, harvesting of juvenile fish, excessive bycatch and use of unapproved nets. As a result, some measures have been put in place to help address the challenges. They include the implementation of the Ministerial Directive on Trawl Gear, application of vessel monitoring system, and a host of others to collect other scientific and compliance information. Addressing a news conference at Tema to begin the pilot process, Fisheries and Aquaculture Development Minister Mavis Hawakumsin says the move is to pave way for the installation of the systems on all industrial fishing vessels that operate in Ghana's exclusive economic zone.
The IUU fishing activities has brought negative international pressure on Ghana, resulting in a second yellow card being issued by the European Union. Currently, MOFAD and Fisheries Commission is implementing a vessel monitoring system and automatic identification system as a means of monitoring fishing activities of vessels at sea. However, these measures are inadequate in getting real-time evidence of activities on board fishing vessels at sea. The deployment of EMS on industrial trawlers has therefore come at the appropriate time. EMS uses onboard video cameras, global positioning system, and sensors to automatically track and verify fishing activities on board fishing vessels.
Mavis Hawakumsin details how helpful the electronic monitoring system would be for the fishing industry.
The cameras of EMS record videos 24 hours a day and will record, among others, dumping of fish at sea by trawlers. It is our expectation that the EMS will complement existing measures being implemented by the ministry, such as the Ministerial Directives on Trawl Gear. Application of VMS, NAIS, port inspections, and the Observer Program. It will also improve transparency and provide better oversight for Ghana to discharge her flag state's responsibility.
The leadership of the industrial trawlers commended the ministry for helping to fight piracy using the electronic monitoring system.
It is the expectation of JITA that since most of the vessel owners are not at sea to know what happens on board the vessels during fishing, the EMS, which is intended to collect video images and VMS data, will help the owners to know the total catch landed by vessels, species landed, conduct of seafarers on board the vessels, and as well as track the movement of the vessels. Since the initiative is a pilot program, JITA want to appeal to MOFAD FC to collaborate and cooperate well with members who are voluntarily giving their vessels for the piloting exercise. We further urge MOFAD to open and be transparent in information sharing.
A memorandum of understanding was signed by the various parties to cement the process. Richard Kwejinyako, Joy News, Accra.
Well, that's how we cap off the news. Up next, the news review. And from here, my colleague Bernice Lansah takes over.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time to join us here on the AM show. It's now time to delve into the papers. And joining me to do that this morning is the Volta Regional President of the Ghana Institute of Surveyors, Maxwell Lukuto. He's also the NDC's parliamentary aspirant for South Tongue. Good morning to you, and I hope you're doing well this morning.
I hope you are doing well too.
Yes, I am. Let's just go straight to the front pages of the papers. I've got the Daily Graphic, the Business Finder, the Daily Statesman, Daily Guide, and Ghanaian Times. Now, one story that cuts across on the front page of all these papers is the president's inauguration of the police barracks at Kwabinya. And we've been talking a lot about accommodation for service personnel, and it's just interesting to see this latest development. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, good morning once again, and we are happy these things are happening. We need to see more of this because sincerely our accommodation challenges are enormous. And if you drive to the cities of Accra and very major cities, you realize that there are many people who sleep at very uncomfortable places. And then even those who are able to rent facilities, most of them have facilities very far away. And the challenges they face driving through or commuting between their facilities and their workplaces is very dire. And so I believe that the time is due for us to look at this situation and make sure that we replicate same all over the country and at very major places where the population is very dense and people needing accommodation every now and then. These challenges are usually the ones that lead to people or agents exorbitantly extracting from people in the name of assessing accommodation. The agents charge as much as sometimes 10% and over. And there are a number of months or years you have to pay for. Sometimes it becomes so huge that it takes a lot from people, and people are going through torture and trying to pay their rents and other things. And so I believe that once we make this facility is very available, it reduces the pressure and the cost on trying to arrange for some of these facilities. So I would say that we need more of this. The only challenge we have is cost of building materials and all other things. The cost of accessing land to be able to build these things becomes a humongous challenge to most people. You start a project and so many people come claiming the land is theirs, because our land tenure system is not very defined and refined. You see that people are challenged trying to access these facilities and getting them done in record time. Sometimes you would plan that within 6 months or a year you should be done with building, but before you see, many things will go haywire and you'll be behind schedule. And it eats into the cost of the project and eventually translates into the cost of rental and many other things. So I believe that economic can take us such challenges and be able to replicate same over major cities. It will go a long way to help us as Ghanaians and help reduce the pressure.
And sorry if I get you, Mr. Lukuto, if I get you, this should move beyond providing for policemen or other service personnel to the entire populace.
Yeah, of course. So I mean that beyond the security services, the individuals, you and I, also need such facilities. I mean that if government is done providing for these security services, the next people will be for us. I remember a lot of promises by this government, and even KIAs were promised residential facilities, you remember? And so it means that we are not off, or we are not supposed to be off. So if this are done to the security services, where you see them close to their workplaces, then it helps them commute very easily and also have a sound mind to be able to perform their duties and responsibilities. And so, by extension, I am saying that this is good for the security services. But beyond that, the individual should also be factored into this. Housing is one of the very few demands in management. The first thing will be food, then shelter, then other things will follow. So my point is that beyond food, the next thing man will be thinking about will be where to lay his head before other things will come into play. So it's a good initiative, but I mean that we should do it wider and bigger than we are seeing now. This looks like a drop in the ocean. And so once we are able to sort out things better, we should be able to expand. We have some few government lands available. Then once we do these things, there are a lot of people who will be interested in renting them. And that rakes in a lot of money for government and for the states as well.
All right, so let's move on to the big story on the front page of the Daily Graphic. Political capture of media risky. And this is from the State of the Ghanaian Media reports published by the University of Ghana's Department of Communication. And 2 days ago, we hosted the head of that department who gave us some highlights of that report. But this one is an interesting one. Let me just read a portion of the story by Timothy Ngembe. Political capture of the media landscape has been identified as a major threat to media freedom and the country's democracy, according to a research conducted by the Department of Communication of the University of Ghana. There was an increasing concentration of the media in the hands of partisan actors who controlled the public space through their media empires. The study, dubbed the State of the Ghanaian Media report, stressed that although there was a semblance of media pluralism in the country, the media is actually concentrated in a few powerful hands. So beyond the issue of the political capture of the media, there's also opaque ownership, financial viability, working conditions of journalists, safety of journalists, and all that. What are your impressions first of the study and the conclusions or findings thereof?
Please on your camera.
Hello, Mr. Lukutor. Hello, Mr. Lukutor. Hello, Mr. Lukutor. Did you hear my question, please?
Please, madam.
Mr. Lukutor, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Did you get my question?
No, you started talking about the political capture of the media.
Yes,
I didn't hear that.
Yes, and that's actually from the study, the State of the Ghanaian Media report published by the University of Ghana's Department of Communication. And it's just an aspect of that report which says that although there appears to be media pluralism, the media is actually concentrated in a few powerful hands. They also talk about safety of journalists, financial viability, and all that. I'm just asking what your quick impressions are of the study.
Yeah, of course. Whether fortunate or unfortunate, the media is in the hands of the private individuals. And the private individuals veer into politics, or politicians veer into establishing media houses. And so it's a dicey situation. For me, it is about the policy of the media house as to how they intend to run their business. There are ethics governing the use of media. And so the individual decides how it should go, or the media house decides how they intend to run their business as a media house. Ideally, the media is supposed to be the fourth arm of government. And so you are supposed to put government in check. And so there's always a difficulty striking the balance between a station owned by a politician and whether he has to do only the bidding of that politician or that of the state. I mean, checking or putting the state in check, or whether to do the bidding of the master. And so for me, it is the individuals involved and how they are able to take these things lying down. As a journalist, I expect that professionalism is key in whatever you do. So you may have to decide whether you believe that your professionalism will be above whatever your so-called master dictates and decides that you should do. You see very few people running away from these media houses because they are not given the hand and the room to operate the way they should. And so I believe that our conscience will guide us in how we do these things. And as a politician, if you establish a station, are you establishing it as a business, or you are only establishing it to cut down your political opponents?
But what does it look like to you? What does it look like to you? And I know that you've mentioned about private individuals getting into politics, but we know politicians who own media houses. Okay, so what does it look like to you?
It looks like most of you play to the gallery and do your master's bidding. I mean, the owner of the media house. I see very few media houses like Joy trying to always strike the balance between what is good and bad. And despite your leanings as individuals, you try to always keep government on its toes. But there are some who go off to the left or off to the right. They only do the master's bidding. But more of you are leaning to doing the bidding of your master, not necessarily putting government to check. And so I believe that a smaller percentage are doing quite good, but majority are playing more to the gallery and doing their master's bid.
And this, the report says, is risky. We all know what the impact of this is. How do we handle the situation then?
I think the national media, the regulatory body for the media houses should be able to put its feet down and damn whoever has set up the media station. There are rules of engagement, and they have to ensure that these things are adhered to. We all belong to professional bodies. We set up our businesses and companies. For instance, I belong to the Ghana Institute of Surveyors. I'm a licensed surveyor. We are not supposed to advertise. We are not supposed to do some things. And my regulators come around and ensure that these things are done. And so if your regulator comes around and makes sure that what is to be done is what you do, it takes away the split power of the owner of the station. And so it all boils down to regulation. And so I think that if the people themselves don't want to live by the tenets of the regulatory body, they have to be kept in line. And so you have set a radio station, a TV station, but there are some content that you cannot show. And so if the National Media Authority is able to put its feet down and ensure that these things are done properly, you see that there will be some sanity brought into the system. And I want to say that it's the media house and the individuals involved. You are a professional. You went to school to get trained, to come and practice. If you go to a media house and somebody dictates to you how to run your show, while the person himself might not be a media person, you would have to put him down and tell him, oh, boss, this is what we are supposed to do. We can't do this. This is what we do. If you won't live by what you know and try to push across, the best thing may be for you to move from there and look elsewhere. But unfortunately, the person, if you live there, how do you also feel? So it comes out to ability to attract other better situations. Like we are saying, they are saying that your conditions are not the best. Of course, we all know how little you are paid, or we know that you are underpaid. And so sometimes we also want to feel for you that if I leave, how do I feel? How do I put body and soul together? So you are tempted to be in there and to do some things that may be against your conscience as an individual. And so there are so many things that plague even the individual. And I believe that once we're able to put things, it may all boil down to regulation and making sure that things are done right. Once we are able to do these things, I'm sure we can have some sense of sanity in the media.
Now, on the front page of the Daily Guide, the big story there, Mahama Brian comments, not criminal, says IGP. And the details are captured on page 3. The story is by Vincent Kubi. The Ghana Police Service says the statements made by former President John Mahama and Brian Champong, a Greek minister, had all failed the criminal threshold test. Same was said about remarks made by the national chairman of the main opposition party, Johnson Esiedun Ketia. However, statements by the Swami NDC youth organizer were patently criminal and had breached the laws of the Republic. And the Police Legal Unit, we are told, scrutinized the politically controversial statements to ascertain if they meet the criminal threshold of the law before effecting arrest. And you know the petition sent by your party, the NDC. Now, Dr. George Ekufu-Dampare, IGP, made this revelation following a meeting held by the police service and leadership of the New Patriotic Party and the NDC. And this was to discuss recent happenings. Now, the law is the law. You can't, effect an arrest if you cannot put a charge on someone's action or inaction. But what about the moral sense of these comments that have been made over time?
Thank you very much. I was surprised when some MPP folks had to put President John Mahama's statement together and petition the IGP to look into it and bring out the criminality aspect of it. I was surprised. This statement was made so many years ago. And for those of us who went to secondary school and were taught by very good teachers, we know what some of these phrases mean. There are idioms, there are proverbs, there are things we say that do not have direct meaning by the singular words. And so if somebody says, "or die, be die," and another person says to, do or die, the do or die thing, I really don't know why somebody will be taking it up and wanting some form of investigation into that. Because in English, you understand what it is.
But as it is now, sorry to interject. Sorry to interject, Mr. Lukuto. Sorry to interject, Mr. Lukuto. Your party also petitioned the police, okay? Now, the police says Mr. Mahama, Mr. Brian Champon's comments are all out of the criminal threshold, okay? But the one involving the NDC Swami Youth Organizer. So my question is, the law is the law. You can't place a charge when you cannot find the law to do so. But there are moral leanings and inclinations to this. So what about that aspect? Whether they're using it as an idiomatic expression or not, there are people who've raised concerns about the potential of those statements to stir up a certain action among the grassroots political actors. So, for you, whether Mr. Mahama or Brian Champon, the police says we cannot effect an arrest on all of them, including your chairman as well. So, the law exonerates them. But what about our moral conscience?
Yes, sure, I agree with you. And my point is that, when you see the history of Brian Champon, his posting during the Ayawaso West Wagon election, and then the consequences thereafter, and based on what he's saying, and the atmosphere in which he said what he said, in the recent past, we saw what characterized his approval as the Minister of Agri. People were holding this Ayawaso West Wagon situation against him, so he has a history. And so the elders say that if you are smelly, you don't also pass bad air in public. And so I believe that Brian Champo is already, in quotes, smelly, and so he shouldn't be passing bad air. And so the comment he made, people may want to look at it. This guy has a history, and if he's saying this, that we are never going to hand over power to the NDC, it makes it look as if his foot is on some stone and he's threatening that he's going to throw it at someone. And you see, my point is that, yes, the law is the law, but the antecedents thereof. It is good people are called to order. I believe that the Mahama issue has been overflowed. It's been long, it's been sorted out. Brian Champos is recent. We have to put the brakes on some of them. If we don't make the noise, somebody will tell Brian Champos made some statement, nothing really happened to him. I could also say this and go scot-free. And he will go and say something else, which is more serious than what he has said. And people will take up arms and will begin to do very serious and dangerous things. For that of the Swami Youth Organizer, yes, the law is the law. Whatever the law deems necessary and fit, they may have to apply that. And I think that when some of this is happening, it's precedence for some other people who may want to say something in the future to be guided by what the law says, so that you don't make frivolous statements and incite others. And so, yes, of course, yes, I am a person who believes in principles and rules. And so I think that the law should take its course and then we see how it runs out at the end of the day. So the law is the law. So we should all be guided by some of these things. The police service is supposed to guide us as to what to do and what not to do. That's why they are there. And so they shouldn't leave us to just go haywire and begin to blast everywhere we go. We have to be guided by what we say.
Closely linked to that story about the IGP meeting the NDC is another captured on the front page of the Ghanaian Times and is on page 4. MPP NDC urged to allow police carry out duties. The police administration has urged the MPP and NDC to concentrate on their political activities and give the law enforcement agency the space to execute its mandate. Noting that policing interventions were put in place to address their concerns, the police service said it needed the support of the parties, including constructive criticism, in order to do professional work in line with its constitutional obligation. And this was in a statement issued by Director of Public Affairs, ACP Grace Ansah Akrofi, and this was also after a meeting between the police, the MPP, and NDC. It was called at the instance of the Inspector General of Police, and this was because of the press commentary and all that we've just discussed. Now, there are further details given also on the arrest and prosecution of some 14 members of the NPP for disturbances during a party constituency election. Also, the setting up of a dedicated legal team to subject all political related incidents to legal scrutiny. And also on the election-related cases, including Techiman South and Otodudio constituencies, the police says the public will be duly updated in the course of the week. Now, your party has been very critical of government, i.e. the police handling of what happened in Techiman during the past elections. Does this give you some relief that the police says there will be an update soon?
It's always said that justice delayed is justice denied. And so how long has this been? Over 3 years. And we are also getting into another election year. And those things that happen in an election year would wait for 4-5 years before the investigation is done. How then do we learn lessons going into the next election? So it is not just satisfying hearing assurances from the police service. I believe that by now, if serious works were done or investigations were done, by now we would have seen the end of this and known exactly what happened and what didn't happen. And so for me, the assurances alone are not satisfying. We should be satisfied seeing them doing something. But if you just leave it ajar and you keep promising us that something will be done, for me, it may not be the best that we are expecting as Ghanaians. There are some situations that very swiftly you see the end of it. So why are we delaying so much with some of these investigations? The earlier it's done, the better it is for us to learn lessons and then plan towards the next elections. And so for me, it's not gratifying. They should be able to do better than we are seeing them do.
There's this one in the Daily Graphic which excites me. Maternal deaths reduced in Upper East. Maternal deaths reduced from 43 in 2021 to 27 in 2022 in the Upper East region. That's according to the Regional Director of Health Services. And he made this known during the annual review of the health directorate there. Now, this represents an institutional maternal mortality ratio of 65 per 100,000 live births, as against 98 per 100,000 live births. This is exciting. And I don't know what your quick thoughts are on our efforts in reducing maternal mortality. It's really sad when you hear the stories of some very young, vibrant women who go to the labor ward and never return. This is definitely a step in the right direction. Your thoughts on that?
Sure, yes, it's a step in the right direction, but every death, one death is one too many. And so I think that we should be striving towards a zero death per whatever percentage we are talking about. But whatever it is, reducing from 95 or whatever to 65 thereabout, I think it's a good thing, and we have to appreciate the Ministry of Health for a good job done. Nurses, AICO, many times we'll embarrass them for some of their inactions, and I believe that once they do well, we need to tap them at the back and say AICO for a good job done. And so there are very many of them who are very sharp and very focused in whatever they do. There are also some of them who are lax. You go to the facilities and they are only playing with their phones, and they seem not to be too serious with whatever we think they should be doing. Of course, sometimes you speak to them to understand that there are some people who they claim over-dramatize their situations, and because they've seen very serious situations and critical ones before, some of those ones look little in their eyes. But to us as a people, every little thing is worth running and clustering over to make sure that the right thing is done.
Right.
So especially in birth, when you see some of these things happening, somebody carrying a pregnancy over a period of 9 months and just within a period of a day or less than 2 hours, delivering, and then she's gone. It's very pathetic. And it affects the whole society. The child that may be born, the husband, the parents, and everybody. And so I will have to say I go to Ministry of Health and the practitioners and pray that it further reduces, and we are sure that we are getting there. Apart from that, for now, we'll say I go to the Ministry of Health and the practitioners.
Right. Finally, before I let you go, your party is gearing up for the primaries. You're hoping to be the next parliamentary candidate for South Tong for the NDC. Tell us how things are shaping up.
Let me use this opportunity to say hello to my constituency executives, Chairman Mike Chikudo, Secretary Egbenya Lawe, and the rest of the branch executives who are all delegates. On 13th of May, we'll be going to the polls. And Maxwell Lukuto, who has been around for some time, is also contesting again. I am the number 4 on the ballot paper, and on the ground, it looks quite good. The delegates have seen me over a period and believe in my track record. They believe in my consistency and being truthful to them, being loyal to them. And I believe that this time around, they're going to reward me with this parliamentary seat. And I promise I'm not going to take it for granted. And we're going to do the best to make sure that whatever is due our constituency and our district, we have it. I wish to be a good representative of my people. I promise that whatever they need from me as an individual, not based on what I know as a person. Of course, I'll use my knowledge and abilities and the skills I do have, but more will be consulting everybody who matters. Everybody matters in administration. So as a leader, all you need to do is that you go to them constantly and to seek their mandate by asking them what things you are doing right and what things you are not doing right, so that by that you could lead them by example. They say the society begets their leader, and so I wish to be who they want me to be. It's looking good on the ground, tiring, tedious, but I am happy about the results I'm seeing. Right. And so it urges me to push on and to do the best for my people. I wish all of them the best, and I pray that for those I have met already, if there are issues still, I'll still come back. Those I'm yet to meet, they should expect me in their hood very soon, and I'm coming with very good messages to them, and I expect to interact very well with them and get on with whatever we have to do. I'm happy for them, and they should also be happy for me.
Right.
I hear very good stories about myself, and sometimes I get amazed how I'm able to do some of the things they said I have done in the past. The Asantis will say at the panel, Tony, you go to places and people are able to extol your good virtues and some of the things you've done in the past for which they believe that you are going to do better in the future. And so it makes you happy and it excites you. So I am grateful to all of them who see the goodness in me. And are fighting day and night and praying and hoping that on the 13th of May this year, the delegates are going to vote for 4x4. I am number 4, and so my name now is 4x4. They say they want to join the 4x4. And my tagline is Amasu, not Otroye. I hope you understand that.
No, I don't. You'd have to explain it.
Ask Benjamin Akakpo, he will explain to you.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Maxwell Lukuto is Volta Regional President of the Ghana Institute of Surveyors and also hoping to be the next parliamentary candidate of South Tong on the ticket of the NDC. Well, it's now time to take a breather for sports, but when we come back, we zoom into our big stories. The first one is that Rather disturbing news about Ghana being cited as a transit for the illegal or illicit shipment of gold. We've got details of that shortly. Do stay here on the AM show with us.
Good morning. It's time for sports on the AM show. My name is Haruna Mubarak. Now let's start with boxing because former two-time bantamweight champion Joseph Adbeko has been in the news. Now he has been criticizing Ghanaians who go hard on Ghanaian boxers who lose boxing fights. Now according to him, supporters of boxing do not invest in the sport and as a result do not have the right to criticize boxers. This was on the back of recent defeats to Isaac Dogbe and Richard Comey.
You know, boxing is a very, very, very tough sport. And the one in the ring want to win more than you, the one watching. You know, and one thing they have to know is that the government does not invest into our preparation towards any fight. And they, the fans that watch us, they don't even come over there to pay so we can have get some value in terms of bargaining value for our earnings. Do you get me? They only sit here and they watch. And whenever you lose, everyone wants to insult you. Whenever you win, they want to share the glory with you. But whenever you lose, everyone wants to insult you. But you win. You want to win more than they want you to win. You want to do everything more than they want to get it. So if Ghanaians know that they want to criticize boxers, they should be ready to be investing into the preparation of fighters. They should put pressure on the government so the government can invest in the preparation for fighters. Then whenever a fighter loses, like how Black Star, they give money to Black Stars, and when they lose, everyone can insult them. They should be able to put pressure on the government so the government can invest into the preparation of the fighters so that whenever we lose, they can insult us. You know?
That's quite an interesting one. But there are people who also argue that national team is a team sport. Boxing is an individual thing. So there are people who can argue that. And when you're going for a major tournament, it's a tournament that the country has registered to be part of. Boxing is an individual boxer who has gone to register.
So when the individual goes and he wins or he loses, they should keep quiet so that he can come home and have his rest. Because it's an individual sport. So they should take their loss individually. They should take it individually so that once they come, it's for them. You didn't do anything. So they go. When you see them, you wave at them or you don't. They are, you know, but if you know, that's all. Don't say anything.
After that fight against Abner Mares, your career took a complete nosedive. What happened?
I think that those low blows from Mares took me a very low.
It took loads of energy out of you?
It took me very low in terms of my career. Not because it took energy of me, but that particular fight actually took a lot from me. If I hadn't engaged in the second fight, my career would have looked a little better. But I would say God knows best. God knows why everything went that way.
So would you describe that fight as your lowest moment as a boxer?
Yes.
Wow. You also had many planned fights that were cancelled. What happened? Remember those ones? That,
yes.
In fact, when we became partners and in some of your fights, I remember one we went for the weigh-in. We were there when the opponent was not coming. What happened? What happened that most of your fights were cancelled?
I would say at a point of time between 2012, 2013, I was installed at Warrior Chief, Toby Kaleto, in the Volta region. And
for a very interactive discussion or conversation with my colleague Muftah Nabila Abdullah. Now you can catch the full interview tomorrow at this time. Now let's do football now, and it's some good news concerning a Black Stars midfielder, Salis Abdul Samad. Now he has been nominated for the best African player in League One. Now the 23-year-old will compete with other African players, including Morocco's Ashraf Hakimi and Ivorian international Seko Fofana. Abdul Samad has made 29 appearances for Lens this season, where he has scored once and assisted another. He could become the first Ghanaian to win the award since 2015, after it was won by current Black Stars captain Andre Ayew. Now let's check out the 4 matches that will be happening today in the UEFA Europa League. Now, quite interesting matches to look forward to, actually, because you look at Manchester United, almost all the ties, all to play for. None is really done yet. United with a 2-2 scoreline in the first leg. They'll be hoping to win. Juventus, they are up by a 0-0, and they'll come up against Sporting CP in the second leg today. Union SG and Bayer Leverkusen, all to play for in that particular game. And then Roma's, Jose Mourinho's Roma, now they lost the first leg against Feyenoord, and today they host Feyenoord in Italy. That's all for sports here on the AM show. My name is Haruna Mubarak.
Good morning to you once again. It's now time for our big stories. And Ghana has been cited as a main transit point for illicit shipment of gold. And an investigative piece by Al Jazeera recently stoked debate about how some Ghanaian officials could be complicit in activities of money laundering for a group of mafias controlling the gold industry in Africa. And Original, a safety standard company, says officially gold worth at least between $22.8 and $23.45 billion leaves Africa and Latin America every year. Well, we've got this on our plate today, and to join us digest this, Dr. Stephen Blessing Aka is Executive Director of the Ghana Gold Expo, and Edem Sunanu is an anti-graft campaigner. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining me. I am sure you aren't surprised in our discussions of Galamsey and the illegalities around the mining and trade of gold. This has come up. But for it to get to this point, the quantum, the amount, what appears to be a syndicate, would you say that it's getting worse by the day per what you know? And let me start with you, Dr. Stephen Aka.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Yes, of course, this is not surprising. I think we've been having discussion on this for some few months now. But you see, the common denominator to this discussion has to do with the responsible sourcing and the supply chain framework that a country like Ghana, who is number 2 in the gold and the extraction of gold, has to adopt. This is because we need to understand the national framework then and also the industrial requirement that is expected of this. The country used to be number 1 few months ago, when number 2. And if you look at what is happening in Ghana, we have a very good sourcing program which look at community mining and also the small scale. So these 2 levels of extraction automatically gives you the level of output of how much gold is being extracted from the community mining and also the small scale. And the question is, do we have that level of data to identify the level of output that is coming from each of the community mining and also the small scale? The answer is no. So if at this level you don't have such data, it is very much possible that illicit gold trade is going to happen in Ghana. And of course, if you look at Ivory Coast, you look at Burkina Faso, you look at the other neighboring countries, these are countries that in the gold trade, they are classified as red zone areas. it means they are conflict under the OECD supply chain program. So there's no way a refinery who want to buy gold will go to Burkina Faso to buy gold because they are in the red zone areas. It means it allows them, because Ghana is very, very close, it allows the person to smuggle gold through Burkina to Ghana. And of course, it has to do with the four charters, which is money laundering is number one in this aspect. So for me, I think that the country for years, because of the level of the national operation, who look at giving licenses through Minerals Commission, providing assaying reports, we don't have the sourcing platform and the source and the supply chain framework to guide us as a country. So that is why all this is happening in the country.
But for you, Senanu, you've been working, trying to, identify the causes and what allows these incidents or events to fester. What have you identified as the causes as well?
Well, truth be told, I think that my colleague on the panel has just done some very important education, because in my mind, I was wondering, yes, we are aware of the illegal small-scale mining. We are aware that people can take advantage of it. But the Al Jazeera report talking or suggesting that there were mafias, I haven't heard any internal reports that provide any data on this. And so my immediate reaction was, how has this been triangulated? Do we know for a fact the level and the nature of the mafia dealings and the gold laundering? Now, his explanation about how surrounding countries are red zone countries because of conflicts, etc. And therefore, if you have a country that is not red and they can do the export, you will have people moving this particular mineral into our country, and now begins to make sense. So the lack of a policy framework, I think, would be one, like he has suggested, because if you don't have a supply chain monitoring framework to be sure, and we are not monitoring the sources either. I mean, there's so much illegal mining going on in so many parts of the country. So the lack of oversight or monitoring capacity, in my understanding, is where this is coming from. And yes, absolutely, until you put in place a mechanism or a structure, an architecture to deal with this, then obviously, if it's even going on, we don't know, the level we don't know, and how to tackle it will be at a loss.
Details from the original report. So, for example, from 2013 to 2016, the gold import-export variance between Ghana and Switzerland amounted to over $3 billion, while Switzerland gold import figures revealed they had imported close to $7 billion worth of gold from Ghana. Ghana's official records indicated an export of a little over $3 billion. Ghana also loses over $2 billion annually in unpaid royalties and taxes on gold smuggled out of the country. And that's according to the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. So again, to you, Dr. Aka, how are these people transporting the gold out of the country? What do we know about that?
Thank you very much. Yes, so as I stated, Ghana is a country that used to be number one. And I'm saying this because of the data that we had from the Ghana Revenue Authority, PMMC, and the Minerals Commission. Now, the critical aspect of this is that the country has not been part of the gold trade globally, because you mentioned that between 2013 to 2016, it is clear that Ghana have exported close to 7 billion. And in our own records, we have 3 billion. It's normal to happen. Why? Because the trading of gold between country by a country, which is an extraction country and a value addition country like Switzerland, has a refinery. The country we have doesn't have a refinery. We only have an assay center. and the assaying center does not have the OECD due diligence, the KYC, to be able to track, to know the quantity, to know the volumes of gold that is leaving the country. Because, for example, if I'm a miner, let's say I'm a miner 1, and I have maybe 1 kilo of gold in my hand, and I take it to that assaying center, the assayer, which is PMMC, is only going to record that this is 1 kilo in the name of my company. There is no due diligence that involves the governance, the rate, the compliance to be able to trace where the gold is coming from.
Okay.
So when the gold gets to Ghana Revenue Authority, Ghana Revenue Authority have no complement to also ask PMMC that, PMMC, where is the source of gold? So the person can even just record it with PMMC and take the gold back, because the laws allows him to just assay his gold and send the gold back to whatever that he's sending it. It is not mandatory for the person to just assay the gold and say, I'm exporting the gold. So the person can just assay the gold and take the gold back. But if the country has a refinery, the refinery looks at the gold trade aspect. So you mine the gold from a community mining or a small scale, you take the gold to PMMC to assay, and the refinery certify the gold. And once it is certified, it becomes a pure gold, not just dory gold. It becomes a pure gold. It means that there is value added to the gold. In this case, there is what is called an OECD compliance that allows you to trace the gold as a refinery. Because if you look at the expose that was done, the reason why they can't come out with specific data is that Ghana doesn't have a refinery. So they'll be able to just mention that, oh, a specific amount of gold leaves Ghana, because the country in the small scale sector for the gold trade doesn't have a refinery. So nobody certifies the gold that we have. All the gold we have leaves Ghana, whether the person can just go to Burkina Faso and decide that, okay, because there's a truck already moving from Ghana to Burkina, I can just assay the gold and put the gold. So PMMC or the assayer will have a records of gold that is having, but for the export, you can never know, because the refineries cannot certify the amount of gold that leaves Ghana. So this is the major problem. The other issue of why this is happening in terms of the logistics is that we don't have insurance companies that provide insurance for the small-scale mining sector. So what happens is that the national assayer still comes on board to say that, okay, I'm going to assay the gold, and Emirates is exporting the gold. But the question has to be, you are the official owner of the gold. So as a trader, what insurance company are you using? Once you have the insurance company, of course, there's a value on that. So you'll be able to also track to know that this is the value, this is the quantum of gold that is being insured. But there's no, because insurance has to be on transit. We don't have all these things. So what happens is, it's like the country has been focusing on extracting gold, talking about galamsey, illegal money, but where the chunk of the money, which has to do with the trade value, that's focused on responsible sourcing, nobody is talking about it. And Dubai, which is your major trade exit, has put in place certain mechanism that if the gold comes from Burkina, Dubai will never accept the gold. If the gold comes from Mali, the Dubai company refinery will never accept the gold, because the LBMA programs always run an audit on the responsible sourcing refineries, because Dubai is not an LBMA. So Dubai uses what is called the Responsible Sourcing Initiative to run their refineries, which is like the RJC. So what happens is that Ghana, which is #1 producer of gold, is not adopting any of these plans. So it means the guy has a truck, he goes to Mali, he goes to Ivory Coast, he goes to Burkina, and he puts in the money in the same truck, buys the gold, brings the gold to Ghana, and can even decide to assay the gold. And once that is done, he sends the gold, he exports the gold anywhere he wants to do it. So this is what we need to, as a country, look at, the value aspect of it, the due diligence aspect of it, and also the audit aspect. What we are doing now, which I'm very happy with, Joy, is that you are raising a concern, which is a very crucial part of the OECD program. There must always be a concern, because We have to ensure a proper verification protocol to assess what is happening in the host community, in the host policy, and also with the trade exit. We don't have all these things in place. So this is what is happening.
And this clearly spells why such a certain mafia or syndicate may be successful in its operations of gold trade in Ghana. But also again, in that Al Jazeera report that you've both referenced, a gold trader who is called Alistair Matthias claims to smuggle about $40 million worth of gold from Ghana monthly. In fact, he claims to have been doing this for about 13 years, and he also further alleges that President Akufo-Addo is his friend and lawyer. President Akufo-Addo has responded, and he says he has no recollection of acting as a lawyer for Matthias or his company. Senanu, clearly this cannot just be one person acting. It is a syndicate, it is a mafia, it is a group of people. Dr. Aka has suggested, some policy, some legislation to help in dealing with this. And he seems to suggest that we are probably not putting enough focus on that aspect as we're doing in the fight against Galamsey. The mention of notable names, and once again, I would say the president has said he has no recollection of working for this Alistair Matthias, but the mention of names, we talk about Professor Frimpong Boateng, who used to be the chairman of the Inter-Ministerial Committee set up to deal with illegal mining, also raising concerns about his work and how certain political actors were interfering, and he alleging that people at the Flagstaff House are involved in illegal mining. Do we have a hold on this? Will policy alone solve it?
We obviously don't have a hold on it. First off, I personally wouldn't give much credit or much credence to a smuggler, a mafia, a kingpin saying that the president of a country is his lawyer. I found that incredulous. However, given that these groups tend to have large numbers of people working for them and they can take advantage of systems, it is possible that in the scheme of things, they have found some Ghanaians definitely who represent them for various purposes. We are not even winning the fight against Galamsey itself if you take the original intent. And added to this, to suddenly discover that, look, we don't have the policy framework. We are not able to, as it were, assess the source, monitor the supply chain, and then therefore have an understanding of the quantum of the loss we are experiencing because we are not paying attention. It's really shocking. So we obviously don't have a hold on this. And I doubt that it will take policy alone. We usually say strong institutions, strong people. You also need a certain mental posture on this matter, that this country is losing so much, and there's so much more we could have achieved if we retain these resources. So no, not just policy. We need people who are really bent on bringing a change, come what may. And we probably need to make sure that those who are already engaged in it, we identify them and let them face the full rigors of the law to begin to clean up the landscape. Otherwise, we may not be able to continue to try and interfere, as Professor Frimpong Boateng mentioned.
People, do we, for example, see the president take a certain posture on this, like he did with illegal mining, or the police, for example, should just pick up on this based on this report? How exactly do we move on from here in cleaning up? That's to you, Mr. Senanu.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, we say leadership is cost, everything else is effect. Everything rises and falls on the back of leadership. So, and obviously you have leadership at different levels. The first thing would have been for the president himself to say, look, who are those within, who are the stakeholders within the sector who can give us a better understanding? That's assuming they don't have that understanding already. Because in my mind, if government was clear in its mind about the gap the lacuna we face and its impact on the nation, they ought to have, through the policy thinking, analysis, formulation, come up with a law, come up with a system to deal with this. So probably demonstrates to us that there's a gap in the understanding of what is going on. And the best thing to do would be to have a stakeholder engagement. Those in the sector, those who have an understanding, like Dr. Aka here, to tell them what is going on, and therefore begin to say we set up a small team to look at what type of legislation and what type of institutional framework we need in place to deal with this matter. So I would expect the presidency to take a stand on this. And then the investigative bodies, both from the CID part to any other agencies that have the mandate on this, to begin to look at it and say, what are borders safe? Are they watching the vehicles coming in? How is the gold being transported? Who you could even, if there's assaying going on and it's a good place indirectly to do a backward investigation to go and find out. We have names and contacts of people who've been here. Can that give us leads as to who may be moving gold through the country? I think that there's work that can be done at least at these two levels, and Parliament can take an interest as well. Because they do have supervisory oversight for government and what it does.
Told Dr. Aka, you have to be leaving us shortly. So your final words. You've been sharing your thoughts recently. I remember engaging you here in studio where you spoke about Ghana having or in the process of getting some regulation around how we export gold, what the measurements are, etc. Do you know how far we've gone in that regard, and what percentage of solution will that bring to us?
Thank you very much. Yes, as far as I know the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources is engaging the Central Bank of Ghana because of the Good for Oil program to put in place such framework. But that is on the side of just the central bank taking a decision. But we need a holistic approach to involve all the stakeholders, as my brother mentioned, whereby we know that PMMC, Minerals Income Investment Fund, because you mentioned that royalties, people are not paying royalties. Of course, if they are not paying royalties, who is in charge of collecting of royalties or managing the royalties? Minerals Income Investment Fund. And it is very clear to bring on board the Central Bank, the Minerals Income Investment Fund, PMMC, who is a national assayer, the Ministry and Minerals Commission. Because for Minerals Commission, when he issues the license to go and mine, it is not in his mandate to know the number of output that is going. He just have to come with a committee to find out what is happening if you are indeed mining gold responsibly. The other side has to be a new body that I think the ministry and the president, because his name was cited in this, and I don't think the president is going to allow that, should quickly take a first step and let us have this national policy in place. Because I am speaking currently from France, where this program is being heard about the same issue we are discussing today. And the question they ask is, Stephen, is the gold going through an assayer or is going through a refinery? So I think that the way forward is that the government of Ghana, through the president of our republic, should make sure we certify one of the refineries or all the refineries in Ghana. I know we have two. So we should call the owners and see how gold that is exported is not just in a doré form, but in a refined form. So there's a value to it. And also there's the traceability aspect of it. We are not talking about theory. This is practical. If you have gold, if you have 20 community mining sites, you know the level of output because the governments have already given money to purchase machinery for these communities. So the community miner doesn't have to struggle to go and look for money to buy. And the machine is automated in the sense that it gives you the output. So if there's any leverage of production that differs from the actual production, automatically you know that something is happening. The second thing you need to also understand that the banks in Ghana are not fully part of the gold trade. They are only doing customer-based relationship, which is you open an account, they accept your money, because the banks doesn't have a gold desk or a bullion desk to be able to assess that, to be understand the level of gold trade. They only accept money, you export gold, you deposit, the money. But they need to have a bullion desk through the central bank, where the central bank comes, regularly to help them, guide them to understand. Because see, we are all going to IMF and all those things. Look at the level of loss that we've made. Ghana is #1 in gold production. The value on selling gold in premium is 200 times better than just exporting gold in dollar. Because if you refine gold in your host country, it's not just having the gold. You have platinum, you have palladium, you have silver in the same gold that you are exporting. The question is, when you export this gold, you are only exporting gold because it's gold. There's more than 13 different minerals that is found in this same mineral that you are talking about. So I think the president should take a full step and let's form this framework that guides us, bring the security on board to ensure that our borders is well closed. Nobody export and nobody just pick a car or a truck and just said, I'm going to Burkina Faso. We need to have the verification. The verification is very, very crucial here because there is new level of technology happening around. Why, for example, if you buy even a gold watch from a particular boutique, they're able to trace where the gold was sourced with the refinery. So why can't we have also this same system whereby if you purchase, you extract gold from community A, you're able to trace to know that this gold is coming from Western region, specifically Axim, or this gold is coming from Ashanti region, specifically Obuasi. The system already in place. So I think we need to come together and have this in place so that all this can stop. If not, we keep on losing money. We keep on looking for foreign donors to support us. Meanwhile, we have everything in place. Thank you very much.
Stephen Blessenaka is Executive Director of the Ghana Gold Expo. So just in wrapping up this conversation, Mr. Senanu, Ghana is the leader of gold production in West Africa. I mean, that's no doubt we were called the Gold Coast. We still have quite a large amount of gold deposits in many parts of the country. Would you say that we have invested over the years or paid a lot of attention to this sector, which could rake in a lot for us? There have been concerns about the non-payment of royalties, illegal mining, which also leads or fuels some of these instances of illicit trade of gold. Would you say that we have paid the needed attention to this sector?
Well, apparently not. I would have hoped so, but apparently not. I mean, given what Dr. Aka is saying, and obviously they are experts in that part of the extractive industry. And it's a bit surprising because one would have assumed that we would have kept in tandem with best practices internationally and understood what the international frameworks were demanding of us, such that we could maximize the returns on these resources to the country. So I think that the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources needs to do a lot to make sure that this country aligns with the international best practice and that we can get these, the full returns that and benefits that ought to, as it were, be our, be the things that we have that we can enjoy, the resources available so that these gaps we have and run into the IMF does not happen. I think there's opportunity to do that, especially if you think about the things that Dr. Aka has stated. Policy is something we can do. Having specific refineries that deal with the assaying and certify the gold are things that we can do. And investing in those and maybe even having an institution that has the capacity to have oversight over this. I don't think that it is beyond us. I think what we need is a very responsive government. And if the minister will take this up, hopefully in the short term, we should see some results. I
appreciate your time here this morning. Adam Senanu is an anti-graft campaigner, sharing his thoughts on this latest expose from Al Jazeera and Ghana being cited as a main transit point for illicit shipments of gold. Earlier, we had Dr. Stephen Blessinaka, Executive Director, Ghana Gold Expo, sharing his thought with us. Well, we will be delving into our next conversation shortly, and it's about the state of the Ghanaian media report. In there are many details that you would or you should pay attention to because of the important role the media plays in this country's democracy and development. I'll be back to share highlights of that report with you, and my guests will be sharing their thoughts as well. Do stay.
Hello everyone, and I find myself here in the heart of Oklahoma City where there's a major monument. Now in the month of April, everybody gets in a very solemn mood because of the happenings of April 1995 when a bombing claimed the life of over 160 people. Now 19 of them were kids. So you look across here at this main big wall and you see the timing. It's 9:01. So 9:01 and 9:03 at the end. And between 9:01 and 9:03 on April 19 of 1995, everything changed around this area because of the bombing. Now, many years on, this place has been developed into a memorial park which helps people to come over, appreciate the unfortunate happenings, and take learnings from them, as well as reflect and honor the memory of the people who lost their lives here. So when you look across from here, you'd see what look like seats. These are the unoccupied seats which signify, the memory or represent the memory of the persons who lost their lives. And their names are written on them. And in the evenings, there's this lighting effect that comes out. Now, I'm here in the center, which has an amazing tree. Now, this is an elm tree, an American elm tree, which is the only surviving tree from that particular incident. It's been standing strong still. Many people think or thought that it was never ever going to survive. But here it is. Many years on, it's still standing strong. And there's always a rite that is performed to ensure that this tree has its seeds and its offshoots in other parts of this country. Now, in the inner walls of this place, it's just written, the spirit of the city and this nation will not be defeated. Our deeply rooted faith sustains us. And now bring me to my man, DJ. DJ, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Okay, yeah, so DJ is a national park supervisor, and he takes people through, he just took a few students around. How you doing? How's work going?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's a beautiful day out. So
yeah, beautiful sunny day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, we're in the month of April, and we're gradually getting ourselves close to it. You were explaining something about this tree and how there's a particular or a specific effort to ensure that it's scattered around every part of this country.
Yep. So every year they collect the seeds of this tree. Now there's a farm out in the western part of the state where they plant these seeds and they grow them into saplings. And so every year on the anniversary, so April 19th that we're coming up on here, they give out these saplings that have been produced for that year. It's kind of a, just whoever has come, it's like just however many have been produced is however many they give out. But, at this point, we've got offspring of this tree in all 50 states, and I'm sure in several countries. I'm not entirely sure on, where exactly it is, because since '95, if we've got saplings every year.
Maybe you should think about Ghana, because you have quite a big embassy in Ghana. It has a big park in front of it. Maybe you can get one of them there.
Yeah. I'll send you one.
Yeah, that would be good.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So the plan is to be planting in all states. So on the day when this falls, it will be replaced with one of them?
Yep. So they've so a lot of the local universities around here and local parks have been growing these trees from saplings. So over the last 25 years now, you've got, or 28 years, you've got some trees that are fairly well established. And so whenever that tree does, eventually fall, they will be able to replace it with its offspring. Hopefully this tree still has a long life ahead of it. It's about, probably a little over 100 years old at this point. Whereas elm trees, they can live anywhere from like 300 to 500 years. There is some hollowing that's happened in the tree, so it does get some regular care, and it is probably one of the more looked after trees in the country at this point.
Wow, great stuff there. Anyway, you have a wonderful time, DJ, and do you live your name? Anyway, you try to do a bit of scratching on the turntable.
I'm not good at it.
So that's my friend DJ, and was just taking a look at this very reflective space, and over here is the main building of the Oklahoma City National Museum, which also has a lot of elements of history. So it's here, we're just having these very reflective times, looking back at the history here and how everybody else takes learnings from it, and how everybody else also hopes that this never happens again. My name is Nathaniel Actor.
It's now time to talk about the state of the Ghanaian media, and it's going to be a very raw, factual, honest conversation we are having this morning, and it's important that we do this at this time because if we allow this to continue, if we allow the status quo to thrive, we don't know how the media would look like in the next 5 years. And 2 days ago, I hosted head of the Department of the University of Ghana, Department of Communication, Dr. Abna Inimwa Benin, and her verdict was that Ghana is in a critical situation, needing a lot of help in terms of the media landscape. Well, that report was published yesterday, so it's now time for us to tease out the issues, talk about the most important ones, and most importantly, discuss the solutions and the way forward. And to help me do that this morning, I have been joined by Dr. Gilbert Tieta. He is Senior Lecturer at the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana, and Dr. Theodora Dami Agenteta, I beg your pardon, Dr. Theodora Dami Agenteta. She is Lecturer, Department of Communication Studies. Welcome, lady and gentlemen, doctors. I am grateful that you could join me this morning to have this very important conversation. Dr. Gilbert Tieta hasn't joined us yet. So let me just start with you, Dr. Theodora. And we've been having these conversations since the report was published, even in our newsroom, raising concerns and things that are relevant to us and to our colleagues who work in other companies. And the Daily Graphic highlights that one about the political capture of the media. And it's a conversation that I've had in previous times with guests, and how that single action alone could be probably the thing that sends us to that path on our democracy that we don't wish to go on. Take the 2020 elections, for example. Classic example, where you had media houses following the elections across the country, indicating what the results were pointing to. And then you had another set that is believed to be pro a certain political party, pointing to a different angle than what all the other media houses were pointing to. Doc, clearly, I think we're being kind with the words here about the potential of that single issue of ownership of media and how it can plunge this country into that state we don't want to go into. But again, the question is, how do you restrict certain people from managing or owning media?
All right. Thanks very much for the opportunity. And what you said is exactly what the report highlights. How do we restrict such a thing from occurring? It would result from transparency. So if there is transparency in the allocation of the radio spectrum, the broadcast spectrum. And we know that in Ghana, particularly, broadcast media is one that is highly patronized, and because of the language of the medium and all of that. And the tendency for, if you are giving it to your, the political elites, is what we talk about in the findings. And we know that there is a lot of polarization, even without empirical evidence. We see that. So the polarization definitely will lead to, two-sided views and not the, the broader perspectives that help us to make very informed decisions. So we, in our report, recommend that there should be a restructure in the regulatory institutions so that we move away from, the political leanings that we tend to find ourselves in. We also recommend that there should be data-driven policy responses. And of course, our report gives that data that we need. And we are hoping that those who matter, the key stakeholders, will take up a particular report. And also, there is also the conglomeration, which also, so if one particular face behind a particular media organization decides that I'm going to do the conglomerate, what we see currently, where one particular person or entity owns a number of media houses, there is, of course, there is a commercial aspect to it where then they're able to rake in more revenue because they are in different regions, they are in television and all of that. But I think that there should be a conversation as to how we can widen, the spectrum better than we do have now. So we need engagement as well, but our key recommendation is the restructuring of the regulatory institutions, and we are hoping that there will be, the opacity will be done away with, there will be more transparency so that we can hold people accountable. Yes.
But Doc, so then again, it's a very thin line, isn't it? Because can we be courageous enough to say that we won't allow person A or person B to own media houses because of their political affiliations? And if we go all clear on that, won't then that also allow the system where people would just send other people as fronts? Won't it allow that to persist then? I'm looking for a really practical solution on how we can deal with this, because clearly, I mean, sometimes when you listen to some radio stations or watch some television stations, and we have to be honest, for me as a person who works in multimedia, which is fair and balanced, I mean, without any disrespect to my other colleagues, you listen to a certain story and you know that this is just being, taken at a certain angle because you want to sell a certain narrative, and it's troubling, isn't it? So what are the real practical ways? Can we tell ourselves, okay, this is what we're doing, and won't that amount to a certain form of censorship?
Okay, so that question always comes up, censorship, and that is where when we were we went from the military regime to the democratic regime, we thought that we shouldn't have laws that would sort of gag the media. But somehow we've realized that liberty has also resulted in other difficulties. But I think that one practical, beyond the two that I mentioned, one practical step is regulation, or regulation essentially, so regulatory frameworks. And this would have to be precipitated by discussions, engagement, so that, and of course there is also the broadcasting law, which is yet to be passed in the broadcasting bill, which is yet to be passed into law. If we can go back, I'm sure by now it has outlived its sort of relevance. So we need to go back and then through engagement, through discussions, come up with something very concrete that will respond to the current circumstances we find ourselves in. So regulation is one, but regulation can be done if we engage extensively with every important stakeholder in the media space.
Another key highlight of your report had to do with financial viability. And so you look at a country like Ghana, not very large. I mean, if you look in the sub-region and look at our immediate and distant neighbors, we are a fairly small country. But you look at the the number of radio stations, say in Accra alone, the last time I checked, probably over 25. And you're wondering to yourself, are all these radio stations making any profit? And it's contained in your report, financial viability. Many of them, your report says, are just hanging in there. They are not making any profit. Some of them are heavily dependent on, the advertisement of some pharmaceutical herbal companies. And lately we've seen with some television stations where they bring these people purporting to be money doublers and, promising interesting things. Also, as a way of funding the station and keeping it running. Do we need these many radio stations? I mean, can't we say, for example, and even in terms of spectrum allocation, we know Accra is choked. Okay, so on that score alone, can we tell ourselves that, look, if you're a station and you're not doing well, you're not doing so well, and not able to pay what you're supposed to pay, the NCA, and, honor all your obligations, we may take the license from you and probably get to a point where we can keep it, what's the word? I want to be careful so that I don't sound as though I was being insensitive, but we want to keep it viable, okay? Make it competitive enough so the industry itself can thrive. And the little advertising space that is available, is spread across because every marketer wants to be heard on almost every station. How about saying, let's allow it, to whittle down a bit, make in more profit for existing and thriving businesses who can pay workers well and employ more people. Isn't that realistic? Or there again, are we going into the arena of gagging, censorship, and preventing people from expressing themselves if they can afford it?
Exactly. So we don't want to get to that point. And so that could be a possible, as long as those who matter in the industry agree to that, and they are willing to let that kind of sort of regulation come in. But I also believe that media organizations are also trying very hard to diversify their revenues. And we see the digital. And first of all, I need to state that one of the reasons the media is no more viable as it used to be is the digital. The fact that now I can set up a radio or television station without necessarily going through the NCA and all of that, through YouTube, practically. So this, and for that matter, advertisers now, and because a lot of people are patronizing digital platforms, advertisers tend to take their advertising there, and they are using their influencers. So media organizations are no more competing with themselves, they are competing with me or individuals who are in the media space. I think that the fact that in our study we found that media organizations are also trying to diversify and taking advantage of those digital opportunities to make money through digital platforms is also very, very encouraging, and it's very insightful for us. And I think that they can only take advantage of that instead of, because it is said that if you can't beat them, you join them. And this is a huge competition they have. But those organizations that are taking advantage of the digital, I think they are doing quite well. And beyond that, other news organizations are also doing their events and even diversifying what they do, so they are into other businesses that are helping them fund, their organizations. These are very good things to do. But I need to say that there should also be, some support, the public support beyond the digital. There should be public support for the media. There should be, in other countries, there's a media development fund. Are we seeing that in our country? Is it something we can consider? And also make sure that it does the political, usually the political attachments that come with such things would also be done away with. So we are hoping that through our engagements, the establishment of a media development fund can be one thing that we can consider. But as to how then media organizations can access the funds without any discriminations, that all those things has to be set out through the engagements we have, and and come to, so that we all come to an agreement that will be very profitable to everybody. Yes.
Doc, I mean, we must admit that this is quite a tricky thing, because also these are private businesses run by individuals, and even though there is a Ghana Journalists Association that regulates or ensures that its members are practicing within the ethics of the profession, one, it is not mandatory to be a part of the Ghana Journalists Association like it is for other organizational bodies like the Ghana Medical Association, registered nurses and midwives. You know what I mean. And so it's difficult to have a united front in fighting for the media. When it comes to working conditions, and this is quite a sad one, we must admit. Some media houses don't pay workers at all, and also it's because they are not viable. Okay, so there's no money to pay anybody, and the conditions are so bad. You found in your reports that many media establishments do not have a structured remuneration system with conditions of service based on who brought you, and in some instances, how much you can fight for yourself as an individual. Okay. Speaking during the launch, Professor Akakpo discovered that it was discovered that in most media houses there was no clear-cut promotion mechanisms. Furthermore, the report found that salaries of journalists were shockingly low, averaging, now this is averaging 1,000, while some received 500 cedis or no pay at all. Obviously, we will admit that there are root causes to this. But again, does this simply just come to an insistence through the formulation of policy and law? If it is, how do we go about that? Or if there are other ways of solving the problem, what would they be?
Oh, I believe strongly that the Ghana Journalists Association has an important role to play in this. Its members are not getting what they deserve, and they need to be able to come out and say that we want something better for our members, and they could set a criteria, that media owners or managers have to, follow.
But
so
Doc, not every journalist is a member of the association. For example, like I said, it's not mandatory. You have to be a lawyer. You have to be called. If you're going to be a doctor, you have to go through your white coat ceremony. You have to be a part of the association. But it's not so for journalists. And so if, for example, someone is saying that, okay, I'm going to employ people who are not part of GJA, or people in some instances, some media houses don't even allow their workers to form unions. And so who is that voice? I mean, how do you fight for somebody who is not even a member of your association?
Yes. So I believe that even if you are not a member of the association and you are a practicing journalist, when an organization that has at its core, in terms of what they do, the welfare of their members at heart, it will trickle down to even those who do not belong to that organization.
Right.
If there criteria and media owners are following, definitely it's definitely going to have an impact on even those who are not members of the association. But I also believe that journalists themselves have to fight for what they deserve. Oftentimes journalists fight for other people. They bring the issues of other people to the fore. They are advocating. What about advocating for yourself? It is very, very important that journalists who speak up, engage with their owners and managers for something that is better, that is, worthy of what they do, or a very good compensation for what they do. So these are some of the things and I believe in advocacy. I believe in speaking up, because oftentimes when we speak up, it gets the solutions that we want. So it is important, since you have a major platform and you can use that, to fight for what you duly deserve. And I think we can also appeal, and this anecdotally we have known that journalists are poorly paid. and we know the consequences, and these issues keep coming up in individual studies that have been conducted. I believe that it is time for media owners, media managers to also start doing the right thing and then paying their workers very well. Yes. And even beyond the pay, I think it's also about the general working conditions, even the environment in which journalists work in. Do they, if there are women in newsrooms, is there, even men, of course, is there the toilet facilities? I know somebody who said that one of the things that made her leave her news organization is the fact that there was no conscious effort to provide a simple, clean facility like a toilet facility for her. And for women, this is particularly important for us because of the processes we go through every month and all of that. Yes.
Doc, so this leads me to the next question. Okay, beyond the provision of safe spaces for journalists to work in, there's also the psychological impact of the jobs that we do and the stress involved. I remember there was a time someone told me that he had seen a couple of journalists from a newsroom, and the person said, "What do you guys do there? You are all so stressed. It's not good. What is happening to you?" And some of these other support services that should be offered for journalists, for example, I know people who covered the June 3 disaster who are still, unfortunately, traumatized by the event. There are people who are bullied on social media. Maybe a mistake they made, admittedly, or something a certain political party thinks that didn't go in their favor, and then they send their dogs, quote unquote, after journalists. What should we be looking at this point in terms of developing mechanisms, structures that offer some of these support services for journalists?
I believe that it's media managers, owners. It's very important that journalists are given medical care. So medical care, psychological care, legal aid, when they need all that support, it should be part of their conditions of service. So the HRs and the human resource managers in the news organizations have to be minded about this. Newsrooms are one of the places that there are high stress levels. Journalists work on almost throughout the day, 24 hours a day, because even while they are sleeping, they are thinking about the next story. Right. In the times, they can be called upon to go and cover a story, a news, breaking news and all of that. It's important that medical care, insurance coverage, and sometimes even security, is provided to journalists, especially journalists whose work tend to, expose them to all kinds of safety violations. So it is important that if anybody employs a news media personnel, they provide them with insurance cover, with medical cover. They provide them with safety gear when they are going to cover potentially volatile stories. If it's a demonstration, even elections, they should be clothed with the right, wear, so that they are protected in case there is any kind of volatile situation happens. So it is important. So these are, I think, practical things, and it shouldn't be difficult for news organizations to do this. It should be part, of the conditions of service of news organizations. Of course, psychological stress. A lot of journalists face psychological stress. If they need therapy, news media managers and the owners or the organization has to provide that for them so that they can work effectively.
Doc, you did the section on safety for journalists. I see your name tagged under that section. What did you discover to be the most leading cause when it comes to the abuse of journalists?
Right. So from the survey and the interviews that I conducted, the main cause. Okay, so those who tend to suffer safety violations are the investigative journalists. So because they sort of poke, in quote, their noses into people's, matters. So ordinarily, people don't want certain things to come out. So if they're able to discover that and then share that with the public, they tend to be exposed to safety violations. And we have seen that the kinds of physical attacks that happen have got to do with those who engage in investigative journalism. And also, when the journalists are not properly, clothed and they are covering potentially volatile or dangerous stories, they tend to also suffer such. If a gunshot goes out, it's likely going to get them because they are not well protected.
And so this also is financial, right? Because then companies are supposed to provide, for example, a bulletproof jacket, a helmet, and all that, which we see a lot. I mean, my company, we provide that. But on the international scene, it's almost as if it's common practice, right? You know that when you're going into an environment like that, you must protect yourself. And also on the background of ownership, should we be seeing more of people who are within the media space being allowed to manage? Okay, so somebody may own a media house, but not necessarily manage it. Should we begin to start looking at having people who understand how media works, how media progresses, what the new dimensions are, and how to remain viable even as we digress into the digital spaces and all? Will that help in solving the problem in that regard?
That is very, very important, and that's why training. So even if you, the person managing the media organization that does not have this kind of knowledge, they should avail themselves to the trainings that training institutions, short course programs, and all of that training institutions provide. And beyond that, I have also noticed that a lot of the time, media owners or even managers don't understand the changes that are happening around them. And so it is important that they need to read around, they get themselves they familiarize themselves with the new trends and how they can adjust appropriately. Even when it comes to the financial viability of the media, if you're able to know what is happening, and why you are losing your revenue, you can easily adjust and be viable in that sense. So training is very, very important. When there is training, a lot of the time is the editors will send their journalists to the training programs, but they themselves but unfortunately, sometimes the training demands that the editor, the owner is there, and particularly the owners, they hardly would attend any training for them. But it's important that depending on the topic of the training, sometimes the requirement of the editor or if the owner is important, so they have to avail themselves to such training. Yeah.
Let me welcome Dr. Gilbert Tieta, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana's Department of Communications. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Doc, I'm going to start on a very controversial note with you. Should journalists or anybody aspiring to be a journalist be professionally trained? If not, should there be a way of verifying the kind of training they may have acquired on the job? Hello, Doc. Kindly unmute your device for me, please. Hello, Doc.
I'm trying to unmute. Okay. Hello.
All right, Doc. Yes, I can hear you now.
Very well. Sorry about that. Yes, it's a provocative question you have posed. Should journalists be professional as a requirement for practice? In principle, the idea of media work is that it rides on the values of free expression. And because of that, it divides opinion, the notion of whether people should obtain professional journalism education and training before practice or not. In reality, every kind of engagement, profession or practice would benefit from some training skills and understanding of the rubrics at least, but also the reasons why certain things happen the way they do, whether or not that training were directly required. So what I'm saying is that in different occupations in which without training people are able to acquit themselves, it is possible to argue that with extra training they would have done even better. In journalism, perhaps we can stretch the same kind of logic or argument to suggest that even where it is not a prerequisite, i.e. that you don't have to show a certificate in order for an employer to hire you, that for the sake of even the business or enterprise itself, and for the sake of the quality of practice that would enable or support that organization, we should always be interested in, one, the considerations of legitimacy to serve, as well as quality of service. Legitimacy to serve has to do with, do you have what it takes? A quality of service has to do with, whilst you are there, are you meeting up to the standards that the entity would be proud of? In this case, our media space and practice. The reason why my response is tentative or not that direct is that I am pointing to the general preference, because there's no legislation about whether one should obtain, in fact, there's no requirement for one to obtain certification before they practice. But as you will see from the logic of my argument, it's always going to be preferable. We know that there are people who have been conferred with the Journalism of the Year awards and so on, who do not have the certification, but who have done well in practice or on the job. And they have done that partly because, yes, they have learned skills whilst practicing, but they have also exposed themselves to training options and opportunities that arise whilst they are on the job. It is therefore always helpful, I think, even if it is not required, to demonstrate some on-the-job and continuing skills training and renewal.
And Doc, here's why I asked that question, because increasingly there have been concerns, the argument about responsible / professional / ethical journalism. And even though that is not a justification whatsoever in the kind of reaction sometimes political actors or their supporters meet journalists with, we also have to admit that in certain spheres and in certain circles, it also affects the quality of the work that we do. And it's important that you highlighted that even though someone may not provide a certificate as being trained professionally to be a journalist, there are important ethics and important notes that are handed down to people during the time that they're working or training as journalists, okay? So when it comes to the issue, for example, of legalities, when it comes to how to specifically cover certain sectors, you know, and how to go about what you say and how you say it and how you present it, clearly we do admit that there's some form of training or education that must be handed down in that regard. But also focusing on the report, and I posed this question to Dr. Theodora earlier, on the ownership of media. It's quite a tricky zone, but what do you believe should be done, since we admit that it is quite risky? And I cited the example of the 2020 elections, where we had some media houses that are believed to be pro a certain party deviating from what media houses like myself, like City, like, you know, other media houses were saying to be what the elections were pointing to who they sympathized with. And we know the kind of tension that created. So how do we solve this problem?
Okay, I think, yeah, thanks for that question. It boils down to, I think, partly or principally, regulatory failures. Our current regulation does not actually require the identities of media owners to be directly disclosed. It also does not impose any caps on the possibility of owned and operated enterprises, nor for that matter, custodianships of multiple media platforms once you have acquired a frequency. Actually, we did discover that the NCA, the regulatory agency, did not seem to have a difficulty with individuals and organizations acquiring frequencies outside of the processes of the NCA. In other words, so they refer to something as externally acquired frequencies. So somebody acquires a frequency, they are unable to operationalize it, or they use it in a sense to auction for greater value. So if you have the money, you can then go and procure that additional frequency. So what the governance regime about spectrum and frequency is, I think, part of the reason. Because you see, if we knew who owned what directly, when you are minded to access content on a certain platform whose owners' bona fides you know or credentials you associate to a certain direct political interest, then you will be consuming that content with that understanding in mind, which then allows you the opportunity to judge what you are seeing or hearing based upon what you project to be the interests of the person who is presenting that content. So I think we should start from regulatory reforms. But the reason why it is, you are right, it's an important concern, is that the use of spectrum or media sphere, the public sphere generally, to propagate or influence public opinion has far-reaching consequences on the values we all cherish or pursue under a democracy: political efficacy, accountable governance, development, economic and otherwise. If we are concerned about that, we should be concerned about those who influence the options or choices that people make in either conferring mandate on somebody or withholding or withdrawing that mandate because they are not satisfied with performance. But we don't seem to pay attention or as much attention to those consequences as the imperatives or importance of media and the influence on public opinion would have warranted. And so I think it boils down partly to the regulatory systems. As for owners, if you leave loopholes, they definitely, I mean, you can understand, will be happy to exploit those loopholes and pursue the interest that their acquisitions would help them promote. So I don't know if I have addressed your question, but that's really why I think what's going on is going on.
Doc, another question has to do with, you've spoken about the kind of educational background and why, as journalists, I mean, we don't think it is so necessary that you may have trained in a certain course before you can practice as a journalist. But let's look at how journalists fight for themselves. And Dr. Tete mentioned that we've often been accused of not having the ability to fight for ourselves like we do for others. And it may partly be because, one, it is not mandatory to be a part of the Ghana Journalists Association. So even when the GJA speaks on matters, some, take it with a pinch of salt because they say, well, I'm not part of the association. And so even though they speak on behalf of journalists, it may not concern me, so to speak. And also in terms of how in some organizations, journalists are not allowed to unionize, come together to speak up for yourself. What is your understanding or also of how to solve that problem where journalists begin to take up their own issues like they do for others and fight for what they deserve?
Okay, yeah, thank you. I don't see the difficulty in advocating your own cause or interest. If you work in a department or in an organization, there are welfare arrangements, for example. I suppose that's intended to promote your interests and working conditions. So even where you are not directly unionizing, I think there's a reason and basis for a certain common platform for pursuing or championing or reflecting and promoting the interests or values that you represent. So, for example, as you reference, people may identify with and belong to an association. Associating is just a group of people coming together who have common interests and who are inspired by those common interests and think that coming together would enable them to pursue and realize those interests collectively than if they did not. And I think that it's even more important, especially that increasingly the boundaries are blurred, if not non-existent, between those who are journalists within mainstream media and those who are journalists because they have conferred those credentials on themselves. There are people who are social media actors and bloggers. There are people who are calling themselves citizen journalists. So anybody can call themselves journalists. In that event, I think it is helpful for those in mainstream practice or who identify themselves as belonging to a career and profession to begin to create boundaries around themselves for purposes of identity, so that when things happen, they can distinguish between the one who is so by legitimacy or from those who may be in making claims to participation merely because they are not excluded directly by law or other kinds of proscriptions. So you know that in other professions like, say, medicine or law, I mean, you'll be called out. In fact, you will be prosecuted if you did not have the bona fides for participation but claims to be so. So somebody says, I'm a doctor. If they find you out not to have had the training and a certification to practice, it's a problem. But if you said you were a journalist, I mean, you don't need to demonstrate with a certain ID card that you are, well, and there are advantages to that. But as you have indicated, part of the challenge is that increasingly the public even are withholding and you see the idea of journalism and media work rise on the so-called fourth estate value, which is a de facto proposition. In other words, so the executive, we know it to be so because it is so by constitution and legislation. We know that the judiciary and the legislature, I mean, three arms, I mean, they are so by law. But the fourth estate are so only by convention and by public conferral of that role. So when public lose confidence in the work that journalists are doing and begin even to either directly take a hand in perpetrating abuse on journalists or to withhold sympathy when abuse is perpetrated against them, then it's a cause for worry. If we belong to the practice and are concerned about that, I think it is right for us to advocate our common cause, to show identity and difference by belonging to certain organizations and associations that promote continuous professional and ethical training and practice. I don't think there's much that I can find about people advocating their own causes. Sometimes, as you said, we champion other causes and forget our own selves. And perhaps it's time. Some of these revelations and occasional studies that allow for introspection are opportunities for us to reveal what the realities are and to respond based upon those empirical evidences that are adduced.
My final question to you, Dr. Theodora Ajintete, is we know the impact of all these issues on the profession and the industry when it comes to the issue of low salaries and no clear structure in terms of promotion, what the prospects are for many people who start off as journalists. We see the drain. I remember some time ago, Paul Adom Otri raised concerns about the elections we covered, the elections that just ended in 2020, and how he was the only senior reporter at that time from his colleagues who were still working at the time. And so there's a lot of export from the media sector because people expect to earn more. So as they move on and there's nothing significant happening, they go into other sectors, they do corporate communication. But this is clearly having an impact on the industry where very few people who have institutional memory, very few people who have a wealth of experience remain in our newsrooms, even training younger persons like myself. So we can't overemphasize the impact of some of these things. But how do we ensure, Doc, that this just does not remain a report sitting on a shelf, but that we begin to see real action taking, so that the next report that will be one that shows some progress, as we are told by Dr. Yeboah Benin, that is expected to happen every 3 years. That's a lot of time for improvement, but how do we achieve it?
All right, so we hope that every major player in the media sector would take up this particular report. This is the evidence that we needed, the objective, empirical evidence that we needed to ensure that our media is not just vibrant, but it's also strong, it's solid, is responding, to the issues of the world. So we are hoping that everybody, media owners, journalists themselves, regulatory institutions, civil society, they will all read the report. We have recommendations in there, but beyond what we have offered, we are hoping to engage with each and every partner in all of this, or stakeholder in this. We are hoping to engage with civil society on what they can do. So we'll share our findings, we'll share our recommendations, and we'll also take something from them, the practical steps forward. We are hoping to engage with media organizations, managers, owners, and so on. So we are hoping that people will give us the opportunity to share the findings, and they will. The most important thing is, we cannot implement the findings. It is the stakeholders, the other stakeholders. We are a major stakeholder, the educational institution, we provided the evidence. But those who have to take the practical steps, we are pleading that they take, those steps so that we can ensure a very solid media in Ghana. Thank you.
Dami Ajintete is a lecturer with the Department of Communications at the University of Ghana, Legon. Dr. Gilbert Tieta is still with us. Doc, your final words as we wrap up the conversation.
I think I'll just second Dr. Ajintete's recommendation of few. There is this ancient Roman Stoic, and they call him Seneca, says, if you will judge, investigate. We often concerns and comments about what's going on in our media or the state of our media have tended to be anecdotal, opinion-driven. Now that we have benchmarks, empirical evidence about different dynamics or dimensions of media fare and welfare, and the ways in which these may affect their strength and sustainability, we think that it is, fortunately and incidentally, we have great and I think willing allies in media people. It's media people about whose story we are telling, who also have the opportunity and platform for enabling advocacy and attention to causes that need redressing. So we need this to be not just one-off incidental news items, but if it is possible to track and sustain attention to the issues affecting journalists and media work, that will be a way to point to areas of need and the nature of the interventions that are required to solve or address those needs. So it is just to say, let us do this together with all other stakeholders, but mostly with our allies in your institution and yourselves, to bring attention to the challenges, but also to tell the success stories of media in order to validate the importance that media people and journalists have in our common quest for good governance and democracy and development.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Gilbert Tietai is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana's Department of Communications. And this morning we've been unpacking findings in their State of the Ghanaian Media Report, which highlights ownership concerns that political actors own media houses, about their opacity in declaring who owns the media before spectrum and other processes are gone through in getting the station running. And also the concerns about the payment, remuneration for journalists and safety of journalists, very important issues that we've been discussing this morning. The report is available online, so you can get it and, furnish yourself with all the details. But the most important takeaway from this conversation is that this must just not remain a report. It must be one that initiates action so that progress is made. You're still watching the AM show. Let me take you now to the Ghana Water Company Limited, where some senior and junior staff are protesting and calling for the withdrawal of Collins Nyama as Deputy Managing Director. They disapprove of his nomination mainly due to his links, they say, with the governing NPP. They're picketing, and my colleague Mamiesi Nyamicha Thompson is there for us. Hello, what's happening now, Mamiesi?
And as you can see behind me, these are workers of the Ghana Water Company warming up in a picket to, disapprove of the appointment of course Collins Nyama as the Deputy Managing Director of the company. This morning we understand that the board is supposed to meet to deliberate on his nomination, but the workers have been raising concerns about his appointment. And they say that they do not want the board to approve of him. According to the workers, they've been raising a number of issues. They say that Mr. Nyama Collins is not qualified for the position. They're also saying that he is linked politically to the governing NPP. And as a result of that, it doesn't make him qualified for the position. They also say that there are enough qualified people at the company to take over as the Deputy Managing Director of the company. And so essentially the workers do not want Collins Nyama to occupy that position, hence the picketing this morning, Bernice.
Beyond this picketing,
and if you can hear me, I am standing here. The workers are still holding some placards that points to their grievances. They are saying that politicians should stop their interferences in public service. Another placard is also reading that we have a lot of qualified staff. Let's look within. And also, they are also saying that we don't need unqualified people in Ghana Water Company. Look within. So essentially, these people do not want an outsider occupying the position of Deputy Managing Director. They want somebody from within, and they tell me that there are so many qualified personnel within their ranks to occupy the position. And now if you look at their grievances, they're telling us that for the position of Deputy Managing Director, at least the occupant should have 15 to 20 years experience in the public or private sector. They're also saying that the person should be a chartered accountant and belong to a professional body of Chartered Accountants. And they're also saying that the person should have a qualification in finance because the position is Deputy Managing Director of Finance and Administration. You should be able to have the know-how in these disciplines. And so right now, they are hoping that the board will listen to their grievances and not approve of Collins Nyama as the Deputy Managing Director of the Ghana Water Company. We're here. I will be coming to you with more as and when we get it.
Senior Mitchell Thompson, they're coming to us from the head office of the Ghana Water Company Limited, clearly spelling out why those workers are picketing. So I have a copy of the letter which has been copied to the Chief of Staff, Jubilee House, Director General Siga Accra, Chairman Board of Directors, Ghana Water Company Limited, the Managing Director himself of the Ghana Water Company Limited, the workers' representative of the company, and the National Chairman Pool of TUC Ghana. Will be following this keenly and bring you all the updates you need to know. But also on the program, we've got Citizens Microphone coming to you from the Ashanti region. Do stay as we get interactive. 15 minutes after 9, this is the AM show. I'm Bernice Lansah. Today, for our Citizens Microphone, we are taking you to Swami in Kumasi, where my colleague Mona Lisa from Pong is speaking to residents about a malfunctioning traffic light.
Functioning traffic light. We've been to some areas, that's Breman UGC. We've been to Amekom Children's Park, where there's also a malfunctioning traffic light. And we've also been to Ofori Chrome traffic light, which is quite a serious one because it's on the Kumasi Accra Road. And there have been series of accidents that has been recorded on the road with pedestrians being knocked down as a result of the absence of traffic lights. Now we are here at Macro Junction, also in the Swami municipality, and this is a major road that connects to Offenso, to Kronom and other areas in the Ashanti region. But unfortunately, you find that the traffic lights here are malfunctioning. But one thing I have realized is when you get here, there seems to be some smooth passage with drivers driving all around smoothly, but that is not the situation here. And it's mostly with the experienced drivers who have driven on this road for quite a long time, so they are used to driving on this road carefully. But for new drivers who may not have plied this route several times, they stand a risk of being involved in accidents or in even knocking down pedestrians. We are here to engage some commuters, especially on how they find the situation and how long the traffic situation has also persisted. I have with me here a trader in this community. Mame, pacho anope de me bahanya bone. A traffic lights ya enye juma ya na yepese yehu. How long na enye juma for?
Pacho, your friend Taliza. My turn nema have 25 years. No ko ya me dear. Traffic ni dear. I say metwa ka say be 10 years ni dear. 10 years. Omba ya adebachim na sadu. Nti. Even say by 7 years ni dear. Enya adwuma da.
Okay, and yensha afi so from January till now. Road carnage is been my experience. Say be a car bonipa and now say normally head-on collision. Ben na record.
I had a problem. They say an accident. Last year, bronya ni mu. Boys we multi-program. Omo fan say mo fan was saying ti. Order no one omo Breman at the quota omo nyina. Nipa 5 no mo India. Omo nyina wi. Omo nyina wi. Ana afen so kwan wu twam a. There all couldn't say yes and call funny say no. What me found me say me ya be wo no. Na me nyam bay. Ada de chama we dey plug ya bomb more. There's a of fun kwan no fan kwan. Your pen on your traffic ni no ntin your person o ye bia no ye.
Well, what she's telling me is that the traffic light has malfunctioned for the past 10 years. There have been series of initiatives to also get it to function, but well, that's not the situation. It has still malfunctioned from time to time, but right now the situation has been there for quite some time, and it's the cause of most of the accidents that have been experienced here. And she is giving an example of when an articulated truck ran over some young men in this community as well. And Timame, why wanna ma report ya tra
I said you knew be our country no. Enti the one you have say share we say ya bibi sama. Yes, I careful to say can be banana maya, you shana, you protect him. Tisane said the tea and you more be a man.
Thank you very much, Auntie Theresa. So you had Theresa, a trader here in this community. Well, I've also spotted a nice gentleman next to me. I would engage him concerning this issue too. Uncle, me pacho, send a osha send an accident esi waheya. Honestly, it was saying.
Oh, a hard accident in the hard because traffic light the whole crew, not traffic light has say so many years. Not sometimes traffic, not traffic in Kumpo. Boy, we track him Kwanaka boss, I see a crime cross a quine crown, we can't catch him said, usually in a keba. Obeka traffic light to home, most traffic light as so much was here. Is he a make of Jonaka bomb? Traffic light in the hard no
Inti me pacho, minim someone na moya affected most of the time. Inti dia na moya fa ho. Have you written to the municipal ma complaining at or more even more MP kram dia na moya fa ho as pedestrians?
I know the a man for time half on the Yakasa especially. The Brema Junction is last week, Menimu Honma and I gave an accident. God of traffic light ninety. Ya can't was a MP or her on a buch chamber sabunsu. Wabahon Abacasa or the number yet Namaye, obey a cry and Chanasa say, the Brema Junction will say obey within bare 1 week. Na lighting in Asa call off. You new problem, so engineers for the engine you say you by MP 2 1 more for Bea and Chana say.
But I was a power uncle, and what he's saying is, well, there've been initiatives, just like Auntie Theresa said, there's been initiatives by the MP for this area, but unfortunately, anytime they get the lights to function, it goes off again. Well, I'm trying to see if I can also get a few people to also talk to, especially with drivers, but well, there's no traffic here, so I'm having difficulty getting some drivers. And honestly, okay, so I've spotted a nice gentleman. Let me speak to him. Uncle Pacho, wait there. We are live on JoyNews. I want to engage you small concerning the traffic situation in this area. Pacho, minimse otafa kwine way, so I'm sure. What has been your observation with traffic lights now a malfunction? No?
Traffic light in the hard journey. You see, we have Ashanti region here. The traffic light here, we have no kakrebi. But we have 4 times. I'm paying for a time no more traffic here. Since there are traffic lights in the say, and no, mama beam. And so hard journey. It drew a numera, a bob around 5 o'clock PM. No air corner. Overhead traffic here, walking so a very bad. And you cry. And traffic light in the day. Omoyama we say 2 coin. Ukoko diwa here omoya. Omo traffic light here juma. Omo rules ni here juma. By I don't know. Minim sempenifo lano empenifo na yema omo hu. So omo yema hwan yo. We don't know. Tino light in the day. Komo yema ya kebema traffic ne so aye dey. Ache kakra. Ana enye hanko. Ko wanim te se krono ma. O dey free 5 walk on monko hear the same issue. Nti ane dey e kronom say here Fort Bridge pa ho. Kronom ye here Fort Bridge because they say hona bie ene ade nti na e very important say on beba be ya de amai. And they say very serious pa. Nti ane dey hu hia mai.
Na me pacho ya na say all Lansah road where do you find say ebia obi gina ho or directed traffic nana?
Direction ne dey sometimes I am a police for no ba 1-1 but enye continuous. And I say police for no omoba nyame anum no kwani omoba ye traffic light na omo ntan nyina ha se animu ha no na omo gina Because animu ha no nyina na cause sa problem no. Sa station ho no e cause ye pa problem. Police for no so ba Ghana police no unnim omo problem. Okoka omo ho asem sisi a wanya man. But the end so the truth is that so be ba begina direct ama cars na ko no omo ba nya enu no begina omo be chichi cars na macho ne ade. Nti very bad. Nti no omo direction ne de enya da bi enya continuous and e cause wa ha.
Thank you very much, Uncle. So he is also saying that though you find some police personnel here to direct traffic, it's not as continuous as they want it. So that's also accounting for all these road accidents that they see. I've spotted quite a nice, sweet auntie of mine. Mama Pachowe de mami engage you kakra. Minimsa ote chakwan we mupa. Enti de bia uche mi. Ah, cars need this speed that traffic lights bia indicate she. Yana emohu.
Eba ucho. Yana eboye mupa. Eboye Fisahano. If you say Hano, try be a drenumra traffic lights no. I don't so power a be pentano yade. I find say Abantia said you do an Judia and Quassam. Just say, O moment to Tonema has seen Bino. I know Mrs. Lights, and let us say, a be agitated has say, traffic lights need do.
Inti me pacho me pese me hu on say minim say schools nso so around inti schools were around the enkra ne pon wa why na so mo study twem because ye ba he ye hu police ni bia so gina ho air directed traffic no
me pacho enkra ko school pa wa ha say enso police ni bia ni a also akra bia inside na twem gisa bia ye na ye twem anaso mo mto na de wa ha say no omno mo so nkra ne nsa no mo de aden atwem me kra last me twem na ka abo akra ba ko ma me Rashid ne ko a Franco hospital near South Africa, a crown call.
Mama Pacho, with the chairman, so what she's saying is that there have been incidences where she herself was almost knocked down by a vehicle, and they've also recorded incidences of school children being knocked down by oncoming vehicles. Mame, intino seseno, Diana, minim se way of great concern to you. Intino Makacham assemblyman. Then you can say then all ya found because already me banuminyan and say yes mo kwai mo babe but as a kwai no kwan as a you focus for now. Anything about traffic lights no so mo pese omo ye fa ho ana.
Yeah, me pa cho traffic lights no omo ye ma ye pepa. Na assemble ma so no kwasem yankobo amane yakasi akopo ho amane a na ye ditro ye mo ho amane na nti esem omumeye light na den emayen omuye ade san omumuchom ni ade ndi ahoto beba ena omuma police forso emegira se na omumfa nkra na den entwa kwama yesa ne a ye ne ati anase ye twam no ena bia nkra ye so omunsa ne de omye den etwitwam ena pragya fo no so no kwasem ayi fo no abobo ya fo no kwasem ha adwen pa ena se komu de bo sister ba akwa den e wa anti yesre omu hye sa na emenyim enyamaye ani die ne ahobrase mi so mu ye ka yanka ye nsa ya ka chombe nti yesre mu ani die ani ahobrase mi se o mmeye maye ne yeso ani die den enwe ye peye
na ma me mpacho what na han fishia be saying and na one kasa o ma and aside say wa kan crofo den one kasa say o ma no minim so menyina na o musade abato mu twem na wo hwe ne ekoso wa he ya eya na wa o ye bad time unya tema bi
me pacho Kroma de metana me yakola na kwai kra ne enye na me maso eton ne ma me so to bia beton ne makakra e wo ha enti no kwasem nyame anim eto bia na ne ma bi wo ha adwen pa nti aso mu adaworoma o mu madum yen se police form de kra ne be twa ka akwa mu na afi so obi o mbahwe na mo ahwe ma abobo ya afo na ese kom ko fo kwan foforo no mbesin ko wura petro share ho no a wo mu bufa so no omu enye enfuo na asomdwe sei emra esanse ha traffic no edoso maye dos
me that's your mommy eni nyame nkwa so what she told me that she is a mother herself and she stayed in this community for quite a long time, and the experiences that she's had here regarding accidents has really affected her. But I've spotted another uncle that I'll speak to. Uncle Mepacho Memawachi, and how long have you stayed in this community and our experiences especially with this particular road no at the saying?
can't hear you very. I can't hear you.
You.
I don't understand what you are saying.
Okay, sorry. Well, I'm saying, I'm asking how long you've stayed in this community and your experiences using this particular road, seeing that it has malfunctioning street lights.
But anyway, the way the day I saw this thing, I realized that they would do everything for us. But since then, we haven't seen anything. The light has gone off. The driver can pass anyhow. Even if you are coming, the driver can kill you because the light is not in function at the moment.
But how long has it been since the lights malfunction?
Oh, since they did this thing, right, it's about getting to 1 year ago.
Getting to 1 year. Okay, and then so aside the street lights malfunctioning, do you have incidences where you have you'd maybe spot police personnel coming here to direct traffic, and how often do they come here, the police? Why you haven't spotted any police personnel here to direct traffic?
But anyway, the last time I saw some of their elders and I asked them why they are this keeping so long to come and do this, that way. They said they will come and do it. Then I passed. But since then I haven't seen anything about it.
So do you have any fears if this situation persists?
Yes.
What are those fears? Can you share them?
As I said at first, the driver can pass at any time he likes. But if the light is there, the light will direct you to pass the before.
So aside that, have you witnessed any accidents like right in front of you on this particular intersection?
The accident? But since then I haven't seen that there's any accident. There is no any accident. Since then they did it.
So, well, you've had some commuters there sharing their experiences with the traffic situation on this intersection. Well, we're also trying to get some drivers, but unfortunately, well, it seems they are all not giving us attention. But, well, we hope to get a few, especially those who ply commercial vehicles. Let's see if I can get a few. But one thing I've also realized in this on this stretch is the fact that we also have some malfunctioning street lights, which is also a dire situation. I've spotted a driver here and okay, too bad he's gone.
Well, Manalisa, I would have to leave it here for now, but the story has been well established. Concerns about malfunctioning streetlights and the lack of MTTD personnel to help in regulation of traffic there. Well, it's now time to let you in on a very interesting initiative by Yvette Tete. She's an entrepreneur and board member of the OR Foundation. Now, she's set to make history as the first known person to swim the whole length of the Volta River. And here's why she's doing this. She's hoping to raise awareness together with her organization about how discarded textiles are polluting water bodies in Ghana. She's hoping to make Ghana's water bodies, including the Korle Lagoon, very clean. Maxwell Agbaba joined Yvette and her friends and has this report.
A dive into the Volta River, accompanied by a big splash. This has become the routine for Yvette Tete as she swims from the northern to the southern part of the country. She has been engaging residents of communities along the banks of the river and raising awareness about textile pollution, or what she describes as waste colonialism.
we are exploring the Lake Volta through the lenses of these swimmers who have been swimming from 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers, and 1 kilometer. It's not a regular day swimming. They're swimming towards a cause. They're swimming alongside activists, entrepreneur, and then creative Yvette Tete. We're about to do the final lap, and this is what it looks like.
Not in one day. Not in one day.
I'm now on board a vessel on Lake Volta called the Woman Who Does Not Fear. Here with me is Yvette Tete. She says the time to save Ghana's polluted water bodies is now.
We started in the northern regions of Ghana. So I started swimming in the Black Volta from an area from Wipe. And then from there swam through the Black Volta to where the Black and the White Volta meet, the Volta River, the Volta Lake, and then the next and last part of the journey will be from Akosombo to Adan, basically to the sea.
Wow, you're going to swim from Akosombo to Adan?
Yes, I will.
Wow.
Not in one day. Not in one day.
Okay.
So this expedition is actually building on research that the Ore Foundation has already started in Accra.
Okay.
So when we look at the Volta River, it actually seems pretty clean. But when we look at some of our water bodies in Accra, like Kole Lagoon, we can see obviously that it's not healthy, that it's really sick, it's been polluted. And so they started doing research in Accra to look at that water body, and now what we're doing is expanding that research to say that, okay, if this water is very clean, we want to preserve it, we want to keep it clean. If there is a problem, we need to act now to try and do something about that problem.
Well, a lot of Ghana's water bodies are polluted as a result of illegal mining, some of them from textile pollution. The goal of this campaign is to make many of Ghana's water bodies swimmable again. So I ask, can this group make the Kole Lagoon swimmable again? Well, that's the question I've been asking some of the organizers of this campaign, and I got some answers.
Co-founder and producer of the Ore Foundation, J. Branson Skinner, says some persons see the team's vision of stopping waste colonialism or textile pollution as unattainable. He says the dream of making Ghana's polluted water bodies, including the Kole Lagoon, clean again for swimming is doable.
What we're doing is three things. We are doing hard science on understanding what is the impact of textile pollution in one of Ghana's most important water bodies, which is the Volta River system. We are also raising awareness of this issue through, work with you all in the press, through community outreach along the way of the expedition. And then finally, we are showing that impossible is just a feeling. The idea that somebody could swim 450 kilometers of the Volta River system seems impossible, but we're proving that it's not. And we're proving that you can make a solar paneled research vessel here in Ghana. We're proving that you can dream something and you can do it. And the dream that we have is to clean up the Kole Lagoon. So we're setting that standard and we're saying, this is why this is important and this is what we're going to do together.
Okay.
Of course, that's a huge challenge that feels insurmountable. Just like swimming 450 kilometers of the Volta River system. But you break it down stroke by stroke, you see, okay, we need a pathway for the material that's currently being dumped there. We need to think about where can the textiles be recycled. We need to think about where can plastics be recycled or completely removed from the system to begin with. Why do we have plastic pollution? Because we don't have clean water. So if we get to the root causes of these things, we cut off the source of waste. And then we work together as community members to clean up the environmental catastrophe that's there. That includes also seeking support from the people who are really the root cause of this.
This vessel is called the Woman Who Does Not Fear. And this is what Yvette Tete and her team at the Ore Foundation have been using for their expeditions. They tell me that these solar panels power the vessel, so it does not run on fuel.
The Woman Who Does Not Fear is a research vessel the team is using for the Agbechi Living Water Swim expedition on the Volta River. After the expedition, it will be used for the Ore Foundation's groundbreaking research along the coast of Accra to map ocean textile pollution. JJ Adokrantin is the captain of the vessel. He says it is powered by solar.
Every single system here is powered by solar. And over here I have 105.5 volts, which means that I have enough power to take us through a 6-hour journey. Yeah, so there isn't a single hydrocarbon present on this vessel. All of it is solar. We've done 38 days from Wipe to Akosombo.
Yeah.
Not a single petrol, not a single diesel, not a single LPG. I mean, solar is the new gold, right?
Yeah, we had a lot of people joining Yvette Tete to swim the 3-kilometer stretch. We had some people doing 2 kilometers, others also did 1 kilometer. I have Dela Wisdom Ashilevi here with me. He did 2 kilometers.
I enjoyed today because the water is clean.
Okay.
It's not the cleanest,
yeah,
but it's clean. And if people were dumping refuse into this or maybe doing galamsey nearby, polluting the water, I couldn't have enjoyed myself today.
True.
And we should keep our bodies, water bodies safe. I'm very, very proud to join this program. If we had to pay to come and swim, I would have paid.
Wow.
Because swimming is water is a very crucial resource to our country's well-being.
Yeah. Well, so some meters away is the Adomi Bridge, very iconic. My friend here, Dela, is going to take a big dive in the Lake Volta. We can't wait to see him do that. Huh. Is this your first time going to do that?
In this river, yes.
Okay. Okay, sure. Let's see how that goes.
Ready?
Maybe I should join in. Oh.
Hey, the guy is gone.
He's gone.
The All Foundation wants you to imagine a future where our water bodies are clean. A future where fishing nets catch fish and not trash. A future without discarded clothes washing up along the banks of our rivers, burning on our roadsides.
My name is Yvette Tete, and I am an agribusiness entrepreneur, a creative, and an athlete.
Very interesting report by my colleague Maxwell, but there's now time to have another interesting conversation. And well, if you are a regular viewer of the show, you know him. Today I have him in studio with me, Dr. Jonas Akakpo. Good to have you.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Right. Okay, so Doc is a regular on our show. He shares his thoughts on many social-political issues that we discuss here on the AM show. But guess what? He's about to launch a book. And the title in itself is interesting. It tells you there's so much to get in that copy. And here's the title: 5 presidents, 8 elections, 30 years later. How Ghanaians see their democracy. My first question to you, before we talk about the details of the launch and how people can get copies, is how do Ghanaians see their democracy? Is it getting any better in their eyes?
Well, Ghanaians see their democracy in a number of ways. So there are the things that they like about their democracy. So, and the book is based solely on the Afrobarometer survey. So here I try to summarize 9 rounds of Afrobarometer, which started in 1999. And so the positive ways in which they see their democracy is around things like their strong support for democracy. So 30 years later, at least you have about 8 out of 10 Ghanaians still saying democracy is preferable to any other form of government. Ghanaians also have very positive attitudes towards some of the things that comes with democracy. So a majority believe that we must choose our leaders regularly through elections. We strongly disapprove of non-democratic forms of government. So Afrobarometer does ask, do you disapprove of one-man rule, one-party rule, military rule? And again, you have strong majorities who disapprove of those types of government. And then the last positive way in which they view their democracy is the fact that they also believe in oversight and accountability, as well as term limits. So those are, for me, the positive ways in which Ghanaians view their democracy. The things that, or the other ways in which they are not viewing their democracy very positively has to do, for me, the biggest one for me is the lack of trust in the institutions that make democracy work. And over time, you actually do see that trust going down. So it's, it's a mixed bag. Ghanaians see their democracy, some aspects of it, in a positive way, but they also see some aspects of their democracy in not so positive ways. That makes you realize that there are still some challenges as we work.
What are the concerns about the institutions that are expected to help facilitate the democratic process? What are the exact concerns? So the institutions face two major issues. One of it is trust. So the question in Afrobarometer says, to what extent do you trust? And then it lists a number of institutions: the presidency, parliament, courts, traditional rulers, ruling parties, opposition political parties, the media. So there's a whole list of the Electoral Commission, right? So there's a whole list of institutions. And the options respondents have include a lot. So for me, my focus is on the percentage of Ghanaians who say they trust these institutions a lot, because then that's the highest form of trust that one can, repose in a given institution. And over time, you do see that levels of trust actually declining. So that's the first major issue that is faced in our institutions, the lack of trust. That is further complicated by an increasing perception of corruption among institutions. So on the corruption question, Afrobarometer says, how many of the people in these institutions do you think are involved in corruption? And again, same list of institutions. The responses go from none of them to all of them. The way I use that data is to say, I want as many people to say none of them. Because if you view an institution as none of the people in there are involved in corruption, it means that's a really quote-unquote clean institution. And more, we are seeing really low levels of, the percentage of Ghanaians who are willing to give our institutions a clean, what I call a clean bill of health. So if you combine the lack of trust with an increasing perception of corruption, that becomes, for me, a troubling recipe for institutions. The last thing I would add to that is, it is also further complicated by partisanship. Right. So if you look at particularly the issue of trust and you break it down by which party do you feel close to, you notice that when a person's preferred political party is in power, they have slightly better levels of trust in an institution than when their party is in opposition. So it means the institutions aren't independent in the minds of the people.
Precisely.
I can only trust it if the people I voted for are at the helm of affairs.
And that's worrying because it shouldn't matter, right, whether the party I voted for in an election, won or not, right? If I have a dispute with my neighbor and I want to take them to court, or I want the courts to resolve that dispute, I want to believe that my courts would act impartially in arbitrating that dispute. And therefore, for me, I find it worrying that I only have a better level of trust when I know that it's my preferred political party in power as opposed to when they're in opposition. So that, for me, is one of the biggest challenges that I believe as we move forward to deepen democratic governance in this country, we would have to work on. Whatever it is that institutions do or do not do to fuel this mistrust and this growing perception that something must be done to rectify that.
And I must say, you've done a very good job summarizing the Afrobarometer report, because 8 elections and this size of book. So for those of you who struggle to read really large documents, this is going to help you a lot. But tell me what prompted you to embark on this project.
So I'd started doing, my own work with the Afrobarometer survey. And then in May 2016, I was in Ghana on a visit. I gave a public lecture using Afrobarometer data. Back then, they had only about, I think, 6 rounds of the survey. And so after the public lecture, I said, you know, it would be really nice to try and come up with a narrative that captures, you know, everything that I'm seeing in Afrobarometer as to how Ghanaians are feeling about our democracy journey. Of course, so I started working on it in 2017, and then I would stop, go, and then there was another round of Afrobarometer, another round. We had 2 more elections, we had another president, and so the timing is just perfect because we are starting to also reflect on 30 years, you know, of our journey for democratic governance. So that's how it all started. It's taking, you know, 6 years to complete the project, but I'm glad that is finally done and I can launch it today.
All right. So tell us when the launch is happening, how people can be a part of it, and how, most importantly, we can get copies of the book.
Yes, so we are going to launch this today, 3 o'clock at the CDD Ghana main conference room in airport. We would stream it on our handle, so on Facebook, YouTube as well. We would tweet about it. So I'll let Kingsley have what the actual Twitter handles is going to be. You can get a copy on Amazon, but you can also get a copy on Book Nook, store Bananaire Damwa. And so, we were in Tamale. I was in Tamale on Tuesday. I'll be in Kumasi on Tuesday as well.
Okay, so people can, in Kumasi, yes. Where will you be?
In Kumasi, I'll be at the Ashanti Regional Library from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock on Tuesday.
On Tuesday? Okay, so please, if you want to see Dr. Osai Kwapong, he's ready to meet you and get an autograph or a photograph. And as he releases this book. But Doc, I mean, when we talk about democracy, there's just one thing that comes up so strongly, and in recent times it's come up again about whether or not we should not define democracy on our own terms instead of a copy and paste that we have done since the inception of our democracy, because we copied a certain system that some have argued is not native to the African traditional setup, okay? And so they say, let's define it in our terms. Let's do it in a way that will satisfy our needs. Because, to be fair, these democracies that we compare ourselves to are hundreds of years older than ours, okay? And so it's almost as if it's not fair, for example, if someone wanted to compare Ghana's democracy to the US democracy now, because it has come a long way. And unfortunately, we don't have the privilege of seeing what it looked like at 60-something years old. Right. You get my point. Precisely. And then there are those who also say that probably democracy is not synonymous to development. And the lack of democracy does not necessarily mean military rule. So you look at places like Saudi Arabia, where they have their own system of governance and they seem to be doing so well. I mean, in wrapping up the conversation, just your quick thoughts on these because of the focus of democracy.
Right. So in fact, in the first page of the book, I have a quote by the late Professor Kwame Gyekye. And this is how he defined democracy. He was writing a book called Tradition and Modernity, Reflections on the African Experience. And he says that he thinks it means the form of practice of democracy derives from a people's historical and cultural experiences, right? And ultimately, it's something that we are also prepared to defend, no matter what. And so he highlights that idea that whatever system of government you come up with, especially a democracy, that it must take into consideration what our history has been, as well as what our cultural identities also look at. So that's very important, right? But I also think that democracy is a journey. It's never a finished thing. You can never say, you know, we went from point A to point B, now we have a democracy and it's done. No, it's a work in progress. I mean, the US, several years later, there are still issues that are still coming up. The courts are still getting involved in resolving certain fundamental questions about what the practice of all the different rights that people fight over, the role of government, things like that. And then to the last point about the link between democracy and development. What all the evidence points to is that over time, democracies tend to do better. They tend to develop they tend to produce more positive development outcomes. There's also the corrective mechanism in a democracy, right? That if you are dissatisfied with a particular government performance, right? At least in a democracy, you have voice, you have accountability. And therefore, that is why it becomes the environment in which one would prefer to have in order to achieve certain positive development outcomes. But you're correct. One of the things you do see, though, is, and you know, I was in Tamale, and one of the questions that kept coming up is, when would we really see all the fruits of democracy? And it wasn't about where, you know, the political things that come with democracy, the free speech, the free association, that people cherish, that people love. But they want more than just those basic political freedoms. They also want to see democracy deliver, you know, good education, you know, a decent and good quality healthcare, things like that. And that becomes something that democracy cannot also overlook.
Well, the conversation will definitely continue at 3 p.m. later today at the CDD conference room. I love conversations about democracy because it's integral to who we are and the path that we've chosen. But Dr. John Osai-Kwapong does a fantastic job by summarizing all the Afrobarometer reports that we've ever done in this country into this book that you need to receive or get a copy of. It is 5 Presidents, 8 Elections, 30 years later. I'm grateful that you could join me this morning. I'm going to get my copy and do well to get yours as well. And let's enrich our conversations on democracy in this country. That'll be it from me and the entire team. We are grateful to you for making time to be with us. God willing, we're back again tomorrow morning with a show that puts you at the heart of everything that we discuss. Do stay with us. We are your most credible news source. I'm Bernice Abubedu Lansah. Earlier, you saw my colleague Benjamin Akakpo. But up next is News Desk with Aisha Ibrahim. Do stay.